It's Guild Ball Tonight, your independent source for Guild Ball news, information, and conversation.
Episode 23 for October 19th, 2015. All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Guild Ball Tonight podcast. Now, I'm your host, Phil, and joining me, as is nearly always the case, is our friend Bill. How you doing, Bill?
Pretty good. I'm actually, you know what, not even pretty good. I am doing great. I am doing fantastic.
Good.
I had an incredible weekend. People should start seeing, by the time this comes out, all the pictures of the first Mid-Atlantic Guild Ball event. And pundit Maurice and I just absolutely killed it yesterday.
Good.
So,
well, I think we can certainly do a little bit more discussion of that event in a bit. But let's go ahead and run down what we're going to be talking about today. Now, the news, well, let's put it this way. There's really only one thing we're going to bother talking about in the news, because nothing is as relevant as the fact that we are here today with the new Errata in hand. And that is going to dominate the conversation today on the show, and probably for a little while in the community in general. So we have an interview with Jamie P to run through and come to a better understanding of what the thought process is behind the changes, in addition to simply reporting the changes. Then I think Bill and I will have a few things to say about them ourselves, because we're podcasters. We have microphones, and that means we get to tell you what we think.
Exactly.
And then we're actually going to have more Jamie P in the form of our next Beat the segment, because we are going to hear him tell us how to beat the Morticians, which is definitely one that I needed to hear. But before we get to all that, let's go ahead and do a quick rundown of some upcoming events, and as we said before, hear a little bit more about the Huzzah Hobbies event from yesterday. In fact, so we have got there's a really nice slate of events coming up in general. But the one that we're going to mention first, because we're going to be there, of course, is the St. Louis Open, which is coming up on November 14th and 15th.
Yep.
In, strangely enough, St. Louis. And it is half full at this point. They have got a pretty good response. So if you are going to be there, and if you can be there, we would certainly love to see you and say hi, and maybe play some games and talk about some Guild Ball. So if you can get there, go ahead and check out the links there. Now, of course, the information is available on the Guild Ball forums. It's bouncing around on the Guild Ball Facebook group, and can generally be found in several places.
So something I'll point out, just for people that are digging around.
Yeah.
It's actually a little tough. I kind of wish, I need to message Jamie or somebody. So with new players, new people not being able to join the forums right now, the forums are a good place to go look, but it's actually better to dig around on the Guild Ball Facebook page.
Yeah.
And on the Guild Ball Twitter. And the reality is, the best way to find it is on the Guild Ball Twitter. You got to go to Twitter, to Guild Ball directly, and then sort of scroll down until you find it. Mm-hmm. Because that's where the link to Tiebreak is.
Right.
And maybe we should put that into the show notes, because I went to look to see who else was, how many tickets were left, and it's actually a little bit tough to find because it hasn't been posted to the forums yet.
Yeah, but you could, of course, you can just go directly to tiebreak.co.uk, look at the upcoming events, and you'll find in there, find the St. Louis Open A and B. And as of now, there's there's one seat left in A, and B is still open. So we have at least roughly half the seats filled at this point. So that's good. All right. So the next item on the list that we are directly involved with, of course, is still, I do need to put in a plug for Crucible 5, and that's going to be March 19th and 20th down in sunny Orlando, Florida. So anybody who can get away and come to Vacation Land can come and play Guild Ball with us down here. We're going to be doing a standard regional cup event on Saturday the 19th, and then a 80% and go / speedball / whatever you want to call it format on the 20th, which should be a lot of fun. So go to crucibleorlando.com to get more information and registration there, and I will be there at least.
Yep. So I do want to mention, I've gotten a couple of pokes here and there, text messages, emails, and on Twitter. I'll mention it sort of wider because I know a couple of people that are on the forum saw some questions I had about this. Originally, I had been playing with the idea of submitting a Guild Ball event over to Adepticon. Due to some vagaries in my schedule, I did not actually submit that. So as of this time, at least from as far as I'm aware, there is not a Guild Ball event at Adepticon. However, as we get closer to Adepticon and I sort of see what happens with my schedule and how it stabilizes, I will be there as long as my schedule doesn't freak out, and I will have all my Guild Ball stuff with me. So there'll be plenty of open play. There just isn't a organized event that I'm aware of at this point.
Well, all right, and we will, Bill and I will, of course, keep everybody well updated on that. And so I will throw a few more event plugs in at the end of the show where people have contacted me and specifically asked me to plug their event. And, of course, that's something any of the rest of you can do because it's hard for us to keep track of every event that's happening because one thing I will say for the Guild Ball community, we apparently really love tournaments because there's one every weekend. So doing that research and finding it on my own is a bit of a daunting task. So if you want us to pitch your events, we are going to selfishly just pitch ours at this point in the show. But if you want to pitch your events, go ahead and shoot us an email at guildballtonight@gmail.com and just include the information, what, when, where, and how people can get more information. And we will mention it in that segment. So definitely do that. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to our first conversation with Jamie P. regarding the errata, and then Bill and I will be back on the other side to discuss it at length.
Yes.
All right, so Jamie, why don't you start by telling us sort of why you're doing an errata at this time, and what the desire is from the Steamforge side.
Sure. So, as you probably would hope for the game, we have a very long-term plan for how we want to keep growing with Guild Ball and want to keep making it a better game and improving it all the time. One of the things that I'm quite happy we can say at this stage as well is that we've mentioned, or there's been rumors of a possible reprint of the Season 1 cards into the Season 2 style that you've seen with Tenderizer and Shark and the Ox special edition ones that were done. Right. That is happening. The Season 1 cards are going to be reprinted. So we started asking the question, when we were talking about that reprint, we first started talking about, well, this is an opportunity to possibly change a couple of things on the cards if we need to, because ever since we released the first season of Guild Ball, we keep an eye on how the game is doing, how it gets received. And there's a very important saying which goes around for game designers, which is that a game will have more playtesting done to it on its first day of release than you will ever have had the chance to do during your entire playtest phase. I mean, and we've got a really good set of playtesters as well. I mean, the names have been thrown around before. We have a very crack team of playtesters, but no matter how much you try and playtest the game, there'll always be more done on that first day of release. So, we've kept an eye on the game. We keep an eye on the forums and all the speak that goes on, and we listen to the podcasts. I do enjoy your podcast a lot, by the way, Phil.
No, thanks a lot.
We keep eyes out, and we look for ways to improve the game. So, as happy as we are with Guild Ball, we know there's always a couple of things we can do better. And whenever we find something we could have done a little bit better, we take a note of it down and we'll prioritize it. How important is it to change the game? And we do have plans to revise the core rules of the game. But we're talking really far ahead in the future at this point. We have plans booked in to revise the game, revise the core rules, and some of the models themselves. But some of these changes are just too important to leave until those sort of big milestones come around. So we figured if these cards are going to get reprinted, we may as well put these changes in sooner in an errata. Let's improve the game now while we can, and then when we do those reprints, those changes will already be in the wild, so to speak, in the errata. We can just then put them straight onto the card reprints. So, starting from the top, we're doing this errata soon, so you can get used to the changes that are going to get made. And then when we do those card reprints into the Season 2 style, these errata changes will go into those new card reprints. So suddenly this errata can get smaller. You've already had time to get used to how those characters are going to work in their sort of slightly changed states, and we can move forwards. I mean, on top of that, there's also a couple of just wording clarifications. Not necessarily just balance changes, but there's a couple of wording clarifications, things we could have done a little bit better in hindsight, and that we wanted to correct. So.
Let's go ahead and get into the details, because I'm sure that's what people are most interested in. And one of the nice things that we're going to do here is we're not just going to give you the laundry list of the changes. We're also going to talk about the why on some of these. So that maybe, maybe some of them might be things that you might not immediately understand the need for. And so going through the reasons for changes, I think you'll see, as I do, that every one of these has a perfectly good and valid reason. And yeah, definitely taking the opportunity to put a few fixes in sooner than later was definitely a good idea. So, all right. So at first, it looks like we've got a section on specific models. So let's go ahead and start with that. And the first was Decimate. So with Decimate, you have changed the melee zone on Decimate to 1 inch.
Yeah. So from our point of view, Decimate is an extremely solid model. And the overview to this change is there really, when you look at Decimate and you spend a bit of time seeing how she plays, there really isn't anything bad about Decimate. She's kind of good all around. She's got the pseudo TAC 7, which is the TAC 6 and an anatomical precision. She's a very fast player. She's got a maximum move of 9 inches and very good access to momentous dodge moves with damage. She's got a very solid playbook. Decent kick stats. She's not the squishiest model in the world, just by the fact that she's a female model as well. She doesn't suffer from charmed male. So she's just a really, really good all-rounder. And unfortunately, she was just a little bit over the curve of where everyone else is. So we decided to bring a little bit back into line. And the best way we thought of doing that was to bring her down to a 1 inch melee zone. She gets to keep the really solid playbook. She gets to keep the pseudo TAC 7. She gets to keep the decent kick stats and the good defense. So everything else about her is staying the same. We just need to bring her sort of onto the same kind of pace as everybody else.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. I think that there's a couple of players who seemed slightly ubiquitous, and Decimate was becoming one of them. And generally speaking, when you see that, there's probably a reason. So, all right. So speaking of problem children, let's talk about Hemlock. So Hemlock's had a couple of changes here, 3 changes, in fact.
Yeah.
All right, so the changes you're making is you've dropped her to a defensive 5.
Yeah, I think that one was probably a little bit obvious. Everyone sort of expected that was coming.
Right.
Sorry, Colin.
No. So defensive 5, 1 inch melee zone as well, and she is gaining a trait called Slippery, which I will let you explain.
So Slippery is going to be, because it's a trait, it's always active, and it's going to be +1 defense from when targeted by a parting blow. So she will have a defense of 6, but only when targeted by parting blows. So the issue with Hemlock, as you've probably seen, is that she was meant to be this sort of midline, very high defense character that can support a team. She's a supporting character with a very strong character plays. So her range damage, I think it's Noxious Blast, and Smelling Salts and Blind as well, very powerful. 3 very powerful abilities. Those are supposed to be the core parts of Hemlock. What was actually happening is that she could use those abilities as well, but they were secondary behind the fact that she was just so resilient with that defensive 6. You could really throw her up there, and she'd just kind of be a tank or a bit of an alpha model, because she was difficult to bring down, too difficult to bring down, and you really had to try hard even just to get momentum points out of her. So she was performing a role in teams that she just wasn't designed for. So this now allows her to sit in the middle of the park as she's supposed to be doing and supporting a team with those character players, and she still has a very strong role in a lot of teams with when she's playing the way that she was designed to be played. Right.
Yeah, and that's definitely one that I've made mention of on many occasions myself. So I do see that one. All right, so let's talk about the changes to the big guys, which are included in this. Now there are 5 of the big guys who are getting tweaks for both durability and, I would assume, for in some cases to modify the frequency with which people get momentum off of them. All right, so Catalyst. Now, Catalyst has been lamented at length, and we see a pretty substantial change for Catalyst. This is a player who's getting undeniably better in that he is being raised from defense 2 armor. Was he armor 0 before?
Yeah, he was armor 0.
Yeah, so he was 2-0. He is now 3 armor 1, which should make a real difference with all those complaints that he was basically being used as a momentum vending machine by other teams.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually did another recording recently with Jay Finnegan for Guild Ball Informer. That's exactly the phrase that he used as well. Was a momentum vending machine, and that's true. Yeah. And there's an issue with some of our larger models in terms of it's just too easy to get momentum points off them. So they're still very resilient models. They've got so much health. Catalyst is no different with Catalyst. Should I use my English properly? With 27 hitboxes, he's not the easiest guy to bring down, but you can just score so many points off him so easily. Right. Yeah, so I mean, you kind of explained it there before we even got onto the players. It's the point with Catalyst particularly is that people just generating momentum from him too easily. We do think that with the amount of health boxes he's got, he's not too difficult for him to stick around on the table long enough, for the desired effect. It's just people having too many hits on him to generate so much more momentum. I mean, also bringing the number of hits down itself will increase his actual durability because people are not wrapping the playbooks, getting that extra damage results onto him.
Absolutely.
But this would hopefully bring him as close to the desired effect that we want in the first place. And it's something else that's worthy of note, by the way, possibly a little spoiler, is that people know that we're trying to increase the condition game of the Alchemists with season 2 releases. Although at least we've strongly hinted at that before anyway.
Many times, sure.
Even if we hadn't said it, it's something that Catalyst is definitely going to benefit from when we get towards season 2. So you'll certainly see him becoming a solid player. At least that's what he will become, in our opinion.
Okay, good, because I love that model. So. Any excuse to use him. All right, so next on the list is my buddy Brick, who is going to get Tough Hide, and that should keep him around a little bit longer.
Yeah, so we don't really have a particularly good model for damage soak within the Masons at the moment.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So we want Brick to perform this duty. I mean, he has the right number of health boxes to be a Tough Hide model. And actually, during initial playtests, he actually did have Tough Hide on him. In fact, there was a point at which in the initial Season 1 playtest, don't mind telling you this, is that there was actually quite a lot of Masons models that had Tough Hide on them, but we decided that wasn't the way we wanted to go with the guild. And in the process of taking them off those other models, it got removed from Brick when in fact it actually shouldn't have been. Okay. So yeah, Brick is going to be a Tough Hide model, and that's kind of where we want him to be.
All right, so Colossus is getting another point of armor, so he will now be 2-2. And with the Tough Hide that he has as well, that is a very tanky spider.
Yes, it's a very tanky spider. I mean, it's a little bit confusing when you look at Colossus because you think he's made of wood. He must have quite a lot of metal on him as well. Why is he only armor 1? This makes no sense. I've got a number of people have said that actually.
Well, and that's that extra point of armor with the best job he does being as sort of a backfield defender. I think that the Flints and Mists of the world who maybe have already have trouble getting the ball away from him with his close control as well might pretty much have to give up on it.
Yeah, and he's such a good counterattacker as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really nice.
His ball holding ability is now really something to keep an eye on. All right, Avarice. He is getting a point of defense, so now he is a 3 defense model. So that should reduce the number of hits he takes and bring him sort of in line with the light big guys that are running around the caskets and bricks maybe of the world.
Yeah.
All right, and then Fangtooth. Now Fangtooth is getting an interesting ability. Fangtooth is getting Gluttonous Mass, which certainly well describes his appearance. Now, Gluttonous Mass says, the first time each turn this model is hit by an enemy attack or character play that targets this model, except while advancing, the attack or character play is ignored. So this is very clone-like, but obviously lacking the dodge move, which clone includes. That's another one that is going to be really not only good for durability, but also good for some momentum exchange reduction, because they will be able to Fangtooth will be able to ignore that first attack against him, which may or may not have generated momentum. But again, that's another model who now is going to confound strikers looking for easy momentum for one influence. So
yep. It's also very good for when Fangtooth is being an offensive model going into other players, and he will ignore that first counterattack that he's hit by as well, if no one else has triggered the Gluttonous Mass at that point.
Excellent. And the first thing that comes to my mind with that is that it makes the player I already most like to throw into Boar's face a little bit more annoying for Boar. Because Boar only, if he's engaged, is only going to have one attack to hit with, unless the butchers use another player to negate that ability. And if Fangtooth is tying up two butchers, I think job's done.
Yep, definitely.
So so that's those are the 5 big guys who are getting a tweak. So let's go on to the next item. So next up is the very divisive Mist. So Mist, the change that's taking place is that the first column tackle that Mist has been made non-momentous. So it is no longer going to generate scoring momentum for Mist. That's, clearly it's a stab at his sort of lone wolf player type of plays, where he would just run in at the beginning of a turn and have everything he needs in a nice package, plus ample, or actually the required influence. And this perhaps makes him take one more influence to get that quick score, and changes maybe when he gets used in a turn, I would assume.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. So for Mist, we all know that Mist is very, very good at that one job of either retrieving the ball, well, say, 2 parts of the job, either retrieving the ball from the enemy team or scoring a goal, or in some cases both together. And this is just making him think a little bit more about, making the player think a little bit more about how much influence it's going to take for Mist to do that job. He's still very good at that job. He still has his 22-inch goal threat range. He's a very fast player. We're just making it a little bit more difficult for him to get that job done.
No, and he can still do the exact same trick if he goes second.
Yeah. I mean, he can still go first. He's just got to do one of his momentous dodge moves instead.
Right, yeah. So, all right. So, So those are sort of the first section. Now we get into specific changes to traits and character plays. So the first change is just looks like a clarification to Burning Passion, which was one of Stoker's abilities.
Yeah, so it's a trait on Stoker at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And the way that ability was originally written, it wasn't clear sort of when it triggered. So now it has been changed to this model gains +1 damage to character plays that cause damage and to playbook damage results against enemy models suffering the burning condition. So, yeah, before that there were a lot of questions about when sort of non-damaging effects might cause damage because it was not specifically phrased enough. So that's just a good little bit of clarification.
Yeah.
All right, the casket time change. Now, this has been discussed elsewhere before, but let's go ahead and go through it in case somebody didn't hear it. So casket time has had a pretty significant change so that it no longer, first of all, it's no longer permanent. And second of all, it can only be used against one model, whereas before it was theoretically possible to get more than one player in. So the new wording is the next time this model inflicts the taken out condition on an enemy human model, the friendly team score an additional +2 victory points. In addition, the model which suffered the taken out condition may not be given Icy Sponge tokens in the next maintenance phase and may not receive any this turn.
So can you spot the other tiny little change there at the end of that last sentence?
Well, if they cannot receive any this turn, that takes the guild plot out of the equation as well.
That's it. Yep. So there was an issue with.
I get a sucker.
You do. You get a cookie. You get a cookie. So there was an issue with miraculous recovery getting around casket time, and that's we obviously don't want that to happen. So
all right.
So casket time is still a very powerful ability, and it, in my opinion, it hasn't really taken much of a power hit. This is very much a philosophical change, because as has been said before, and we said, and Rich mentioned it on the Flock on All podcast, is that casket time was breaking one of the core principles of Guild Ball's design, which is that we don't put things in the game, or we try not to put things in the game that just straight up prevent you from doing something. Mm-hmm. So the example I keep citing from this is close control. So close control, you ignore the first tackle result against the model with close control. What close control is not is it doesn't say you can't tackle this model. Mm-hmm. It just makes it a bit more difficult for you. And casket time was saying you cannot bring this model back to the table. So breaking a core design principle of the game, we needed to bring it back into line.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also like how sort of in practice, I think that this change kind of moves casket time from a opening of the game set piece play to a game-ending opportunistic play where those extra 2 victory points, making it worth essentially the same as a goal. I think it's a much more interesting play, sort of in that role than as a thing that set up set a poor tone for the whole game at the beginning, the way that it was so often being used.
Yeah. If anything, you can almost say it's a bit more versatile for the Mortician player now as well, because as you said, there isn't this pressure to get it done at the start of the game at the earliest opportunity. It's as effective on turn 5 as it is on turn 1.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot better, to be honest. All right, so let's talk about Gutter. So Gutter gets a little change here, actually. So Chain Grab is losing its damage component. So now the text is simply target enemy model suffers a 4-inch push directly towards this model. No longer has the 1 damage. All right.
So what do you think about that?
Well, it's fine with me. No, because I mean it was an ability which had sort of an uneven application because of how often and effectively it could be used in some teams versus others. And what you want with any given player is that they essentially run as well under any given circumstance. You don't want players who are going to, especially union players, who are going to have an advantage over guild players in that regard. So because Gutter had become particularly dangerous under Ox's tutelage. I think that with the ease with which chain grab could be executed and the efficiency of getting those 2 damage. No, I think that it's, and chain grab shouldn't be a play that is used to, I don't feel like that was a play that should have been used to gain damage itself. It should have been a play that was used to set up damage, and especially to set up damage by other team members. It should be the play that pulls them into the trap, and then you spring the trap. So, no, I think that the changes there are more than warranted. I think it normalizes the player's potency across all 8 teams, and it also recast that ability back into its intended purpose as opposed to its adopted purpose.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Phil.
Excellent.
So the only, let's take, just to illustrate it a bit more clearly as well, is or a bit more simply, shall I say, let's take a really extreme example. So let's take Gutter in that Butcher's team. Let's throw Tooled Up onto her so let's say Tooled Up is on her from Meat Hook. Gutter is within the owner, and let's have Ox's legendary play up as well. So suddenly these chain grabs are doing 3 to 4, depending on the exact positioning, 3 to 4 damage with each throw, and that's just not what they're supposed to be doing, because suddenly you don't even have to drag a model into melee. You could throw 4 of these at a Def 2 model and cause 12 to 16 damage, and it's just completely unintended.
Right, and you're doing them for 1 influence a pop, which is
exactly
at range is a lot to be asking. So without the ability to counterattack, without the ability to, so it was a thing that was just a little bit out of whack with other similar abilities and other similar players. All right, so let's move to the next one here, and the next one is Clone. Now, Clone has got, I'm going to read the text, and then we're going to decompress the several things that happen as a result of this change, all of which are subtle.
I will just say, by the way, but this is something that we spent a good 3 to 4 weeks just discussing the clone wording. So this is something we knew we had to nail on the head, because the original wording is a little bit vague and it's too open to interpretation. So we really wanted to nail it down, and we feel like we have.
Okay. So the new text of Clone is: the next time this model is hit by an enemy attack or character play that targets this model, except while advancing, the attack or character play is ignored. This model then makes a 2-inch dodge, and Clone expires. This character play may only be used once per turn. All right, so let's work through the changes here. So starting with the first sentence, the next time this model is hit. Now that takes away the choice with Clone. So as Clone had been written, it was a may, and you could either trigger a clone or not trigger a clone.
Yeah, that was unintended when we first wrote Clone. It was always supposed to be on the first attack, and as I said before, the wording was too open and too vague, so it could be interpreted, was interpreted as an option.
All right, now the clause on that same sentence, or character play that targets this model, that means no more AoEs.
Correct. So if you are hit by a scything blow that doesn't target you, or an AoE, then Clone will do nothing to protect you.
Right. Except while advancing. Now, this is also a change because that takes away the ability to trigger it while on a parting blow.
Yes. Again, an unintended side effect.
Yeah, and that's an important thing because the ability to do repositions as a part of parting blows was specifically removed early, I guess sort of middle late in the progress of the game's rules. And Clone was an accidental exception to that. And really any time, and the reason it had to go is because repositions as a part of an advance or a charge are a nightmare. Just trust me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So this model then makes a 2-inch dodge. That's unchanged. And Clone expires. Also, I guess technically unchanged. But before we go, there's one more change. This character play may only be used once per turn. Now, I know some people are going to be very disappointed with this because that counterattack to recast Clone was definitely a tool in the arsenal
Yeah, it potentially made characters like Midas and Vitriol just untouchable if they had access to, a decent counterattack target. You just couldn't catch them. It just was unfair. So.
Well, I understand, having tried to catch them on many occasions, and I must admit doing it myself. So I suppose I'm part of the problem. All right, next up. So now that the alchemists have had their chance to feel the sting, let's move on to the fishermen and say that Gut and String is getting an adjustment. So the ability is now a range P, which means it can only be used in melee range.
Yeah,
of the attacker.
So you can only use it in melee range, as you said, and it can only target the model that you hit with the original attack.
Right.
So if you had two models in melee range, you attacked, say, Boar, you could only trigger Gut and String on Boar. You couldn't trigger Gut and String on Ox, even if he was in the same melee. So you can only place it on the model that you have initially attacked. So we've also removed the cost, so it's just costs the one Guild Ball play icon now. It doesn't have a cost in influence because having a range
play,
having a range of P suddenly makes its cost irrelevant. Other than that one play icon.
Right. So we there's definitely some of that ability to lock down opponents that the fishermen had with Shark's play there is going to be adjusted by that, but I guess that was somebody else's job. Not so much
so the things that Shark could do are just things that were getting a little bit excessive. So he was never really meant to go into Boar. Just use Boar as an example here, being a Def 2 model with no armor, and be able to Gut and String an entire team because he could. Because the butchers like to clump together, and you can probably get to most of the butchers if you're within range of Boar. And then suddenly you've Gut and String the entire team, generated a load of momentum along the way, and then on top of that, throw your legendary play down, and you literally cannot move for that turn. So it's just too over the top. It was also causing negative play experiences. So we haven't prevented Shark from doing this to a couple of players. Whoever he gets in melee range off, and Shark has a really fast movement. He's got really easy access to a 2-inch non-momentous dodge on his 2-column, so he can still jump around a team.
He's still going 10, 11 inches a turn. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he can get to 2 players if you really, really plan for it. He can get to 3 or 4 players. He can still do that. It just make it a little bit harder for him, and it's not quite so easy to lock that whole team down. So, and it also gives the opponent a chance to play around it as well, so that it's not just feeling like they're just walking into the inevitable. So yeah.
All right. So we're not done with Gutter. So Gutter is getting a modification also to Life Drinker, and this is just being cut in half. So instead of 2 health points recovered per instance of damage, it is now going to be 1 health point recovered per instance of damage.
Yes, so I mean, as you anybody that plays with the momentum abilities a lot, as every player should, you'll know that healing in this game is very well controlled. Other abilities that heal players, like smelling salts or the Mechanica repair one the engineers have, they're 1% abilities. They only heal 2 damage, I believe. They're very well controlled rules. This was just going a little bit over the curve in terms of what it was just out of whack with the rest of how of the healing mechanics in Guild Ball work. So
because she was doing often 6 and 8 points of healing in a turn.
Yeah, and then throwing in an MP on top of that, she could heal 12 boxes on herself in one activation. It's just too much.
Yeah, no, it's another bringing Gutter back to the normal.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got a clarification for obstructions. This is a good one. So now the wording should say a model in or within the 1 inch of the edge of an obstruction benefits from cover. So that just kind of takes out there had been questions about cases where a model was literally standing on a piece of cover and whether or not they got cover because the wording had been within an inch of.
Yeah, it's also trying to clear up that there's sometimes people get confused when reading the obstruction rules, that if you walk within 1 inch of an obstruction, are you also taking a movement penalty because of the rules for climbing onto obstructions, and that's just not the case. So this is trying to clear that up and just saying when you are within 1 inch of an edge of obstruction, you benefit from cover. And if you really wanted to be pedantic, you could then say, and there is no movement penalty.
Right.
It's just trying to make that nice and clear. You're within 1 inch of an obstruction. You have cover. You will only take that movement penalty when you try and traverse the obstruction.
All right, so Siren is the focus of the next change, and that is that Seduction has been changed to a once per turn ability.
So let's take, again, a really extreme example of this. So Siren has charged into Boar. Let's keep beating up Boar. Or has walked into Boar with 3 influence. Yes, for sure. So she's walked into Boar. Boar, let's say he's been beaten up a little bit already. So he's got gut and strings on him, and there are 2 other fisherman models in melee, or 2 or 3 other in melee. So if she starts, for each attack she's making, she could wrap that playbook that she's got, which is only 3 columns long. She can wrap it twice, and get that seduction off twice. So she's getting 2. She's made 1 attack, 1 influence. She, in this situation, would be getting 2 momentum points back for triggering it twice. Boar would then make 2 attacks if there's another model in melee range. He could also be generating momentum for the fisherman there. So 1 influence point could be generating you 4 MPs as a return and a boatload of damage because you've hit Boar. And then she can do that another 2 times. So your 3 influence could be returning you 12 momentum points. And it's just, it is an extreme example, and it takes some setting up.
Yeah, it seems a bit much.
Yeah, but even lesser examples, just where she charges into a low defense heavy and wrapping seduction and getting things like that to happen. It's just we can't allow that amount of momentum generation per expenditure of influence.
For 1 influence, sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Tough Hide. This one is mostly a clarification, and that is that the text is going to be changed to enemy plays that cause damage to or playbook damage results that hit this model are reduced by -1 damage.
So, and I'm not entirely sure why it got in there. It's just something that we've just made a mistake on, which is the word targeted or targets somehow worked its way into the current word.
That's right. That's what the change
Tough Hide. Yeah, so because the word target is in there, it was making people think sometimes that Tough Hide didn't protect you against.
Wouldn't work,
yeah, Scything Blow and AoEs, and that's just not the case. Whenever we produce a Tough Hide model, we always balance that model around the fact that Tough Hide works on everything apart from conditions, which it now does. So that sorts that out nice and cleanly for us.
Okay, very good. Now the last change was regarding parting blows, again more broadly.
Yeah, so there's a couple of traits in the game which are, affecting parting blows when they shouldn't be doing so. So Swift Strikes, which is on Salvo, and Knockback, which is on Brick and on Tower. So currently those are effects that will trigger on a playbook damage result or a playbook result. So currently they can actually trigger on a parting blow, which they're not supposed to. So if you start giving somebody dodge moves while they're also doing a parting blow, you can actually end up with this sort of infinity chain of extra parting blows. So if somebody moves out of Salvo's melee range, they take a parting blow, he damages them, he dodges 1 inch back into melee range again, and then they have to take an entirely new parting blow just to leave him again. And it's just not supposed to happen. It's the entire reason why we took dodge and push moves out of parting blows. So there will be another clarification, which will basically just say that you cannot make dodges and pushes happen during a parting blow.
Yeah, no, and that's just a consistency to a rules intended change there. So
yeah.
All right, so that's the errata. So not as much as I maybe thought we might see, but a few little surprises. Do you want to sort of pre-address any concerns that anyone might have as a result of any of these changes?
I think particularly for the Fisherman players, they're going to feel hard done by. But please remember, we love this game very much. We play this game a lot ourselves, and we very much enjoy playing it. Like we have spent weeks and months and uncounted hours arguing over these erratas, making these errata points, making sure we get them right, because we need to get them right for the players. We know that people have spent a lot of money on this game. We know that people have invested a lot of time in this game and painting the models, and we love it every bit as much as you guys do, and we want to make sure that people are enjoying this game. So hopefully we want people to see these as improving the game overall, because that's what we truly believe that these changes do, that they improve your experience of playing Guild Ball.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add to it is just that I think it would have been an unrealistic expectation on anybody's part for a game to go from a couple hundred playtest games to many thousands of public games and not have a few things sort of bubble out to the surface. And what you really see with this set of Errata is that there were no core mechanics that were broken. There were no like big, obvious, important features that were, we don't have to change any core mechanics. We don't have to remove any effects entirely. What we've got here is a suite of tweaks just to make the game, which is at its core, really intended to be a game which has a strong competitive balance. It brings it back to that competitive balance, and I think that it's the character of this set of changes says as much about how strong the underlying game really was as maybe more so than having not needed to make any changes in the first place, because I think that would just have been sort of a head in the sand approach. So no, I think that this is all good stuff, and I know that it is certainly not going to elicit any strongly negative editorializing from me.
I'm glad to hear that.
But it's probably just more evidence that I probably shouldn't be making decisions anyway, because I probably would not have done as good a job myself. So, all right. Well, thanks for stopping by and letting us have a look at all this, and most importantly, for telling us why.
You're very welcome. I mean, there's one last point I want to throw in at the end, which is, even though we are making a big effort here to try and sort of give our explanations, we don't just want to throw this errata out there without saying anything about it. We want to tell you why we've done things, which is why, we have an interview time like this. And but we're not trying to cut people off from giving their feedback. We're just giving you our thoughts. People can be fully informed when they go on the forums and give us feedback, and we want to read that feedback. We want to know what you think. Even if you disagree with us, it's fine. Just go on the forums and talk about this stuff. Let us know what you think, and we're happy to hear that feedback. And we're genuinely just trying to make this game better for you guys to play. So we don't want to cut you guys off from that. We still want to hear what you have to say about it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, and thanks for talking.
Thanks again, Phil.
All right. All right. So that was what Jamie P has to say about
Jamie P and Positive Phil.
I'm just a positive guy.
You certainly are. Wow. Does that make me Bert to your Ernie?
Or perhaps the Waldorf to my Statler. But that would probably be a little closer to home. So what do you think, Bill? Is the sky falling?
Okay, so the sky is not falling.
No.
The sky is certainly not falling. Unlike you, my friend, who spent your whole time saying, oh yeah, I think that's a necessary change. Oh, I can see that. As a whole, so I'm so torn on this. I don't want to be negative, Phil.
Well, you don't have to be.
I don't have to be, but if I'm going to be, but then I'd be, okay, so this is where I'm at.
Right.
The bulk of these changes, I see a couple here and there that I absolutely agree with. The bulk of them, I feel, are unnecessary and or the wrong way to address the problem that was identified. I would point out that when one single guild's name keeps coming up in every example of what's broken, i.e. the butchers, maybe you looked at the wrong guild to fix. And I will say that I do think while each of these either may be a good change or have an effect that's not a huge change, it really ends up with an entire errata looking like the designer said, well, we hate the union anyway, so let's just screw them over.
Yeah, well, I will say, in my own defense, I don't think that the phrase I would apply to most of this is that's a necessary change. There are a lot of cases where I would say I understand that change. Because I do agree that there are a couple of tweaks that were really corner case, right? So, let's talk about, before we get to all this butcher stuff, let's talk about the ones that I think were understandable, but come up infrequently. And I think that you really have to look at something like the change to gut and string. You listen to Jamie describe why that was changed, and you say, yeah, that doesn't work the way that I think it probably should, but did you ever see it work incorrectly?
Right.
And so the thing is, I think at the end of the day, 99% of us won't ever notice the difference. I mean, the change to gut and string, also the change to seduction, both of the changes that hit the fishermen.
So
those are hard to get to work.
Funny thing, a really amusing thing when you talk about gut and string.
Yeah.
I'm gonna reference my buddy Maurice up here, another pundit. Maurice is amazing at getting gut and string to work, and as a matter of fact, yesterday, during the Huzzah event, we had a great moment where after a game where he had with one of our other players, the other player came over, and the three of us were all talking, and I mentioned to them, "Oh, by the way, one of the errata changes that's coming in is around gut and string," and Maurice immediately went, "Oh." And the other guy went, "Oh, thank God. You mean he's not going to gut and string three of my models at the same time?" So on that, right, that's one. Maurice has been great at using it, and he'll get off. He'll pick if you put a 2+ guy on the table and everybody else is within 6 inches or 4 inches, your whole team's going to be gut and strong. He's good at that, but he's always worked that in as much as he can, and you can mitigate it if you're familiar playing him.
Right.
I get that change. And funny enough, the referee, like, this is where I go back to. The problem there was clearly problem. The thing that was fixed there was clearly a intention with gut and string. But I find it amusing that the example Jamie uses still points back to the butchers. Well, if the butchers are that high in your mind,
I think on
issues,
that specific one, we had just been discussing the butchers. Okay. No, so the thing is but I think that the takeaway here is that while some of these effects were not affecting,
right,
some of these effects were not affecting the community as a whole, they were clearly coming into play at the higher competitive level. And really that is where balance is most important. And that is also where imbalance is most obvious.
I agree. Well, and why don't we kind of go through these and take these one by one? And I'll give you. I mean, let's break it down, and I'll give you my opinion. You can talk about your opinion when you're not, being nice to Jamie and coddling his gentle emotions.
Oh, please! Like I'm not that much of a sycophant. I just, I just don't. I don't know that. That any of this is really is not. I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. But maybe I'm just a little easier. So, all right. So the top of my list of items here, decimate, right?
Yes.
1 inch melee zone. On the one hand, I thought that Union team where everybody had a 2 inch melee zone was kind of a cool special effect. But at the end of the day, I am so bad at using decimate that I personally can't evaluate this change because I never got a good service out of Decimate in the first place. Now, I understand there are people out there who used her incredibly well. And I understand. Right. And I understand. I totally understand what they're saying. She does have a vitriol-like stat line.
Yep.
Take it or leave it.
This is one. This is one where I don't think it's necessary. I don't see a major change between Decimate with a 1-inch and a Decimate with a 2-inch,
right?
Because she doesn't have issues getting in to engage that extra inch, at least in my experience. And where I really see the 2-inch come into play is on those long plays, those maximum range plays. And in my experience, when I've used Decimate, I have yet to be at one of those maximum range plays. Specifically looking at, bouncing in. I always like to be in Blackheart's aura. And I think this is the other thing that comes up. I like to be in Blackheart's aura. I like to be out there sort of tooling around with people that have already been sort of cut up. Using her with the Masons, I like being near the monkey so that she can be tooled up and then go to town. That said, and I think this is a big part for me, I primarily play Union players in the Union as a Union team. Right. So that could also be, and I believe that's going to be why, or where the most complaint is going to come from about coming after so many Union players.
Right.
Is these are changes to a single team. Now, yes, there's some fish changes in here. There's some buffs to the alchemists. There's some other things in there. But primarily, Morticians changes on wording. But primarily this went after Union players. And it was Union players in, as I understand from what Jamie said, in a effort to balance the quote-unquote balance or quote-unquote fix the Union in relation to their mercenary characteristic. And that's, I think, where it, I'm not sure how much was looked at on how it affects the Union in and of itself.
Well, and I will say, though, I played a game yesterday where I specifically played Union. I took as many altered players as I could fit in. Now, Decimate wasn't one of them because I kind of hate Decimate. But I played Fangtooth, I played Mist, I played Hemlock, I played Gutter. I won 12-4 against the Butchers. It was, and I will honestly say that none of the negative changes essentially came into play.
Okay.
And Fangtooth's little buff was great. It affected the way people played around him. But, that was one case. I had, maybe I had a good game. Maybe we're playing at a level where these changes are insignificant. But I think that in the end, I think that the changes really, the changes are in different categories. Decimate was changed because it was just simply felt that she had too much going for her. And my experience certainly tells me that that's not an issue, but I can understand that, when you have access to all the data, maybe you're seeing her get selected a little too often.
And we don't have a way to get that. I would love to see that data because I don't know. She had a little too much. Okay, but was she actually overbalanced? Just because, I've heard I think it was the WCWW guys say this about a couple of characters. Oh my God, this character has so much on their card they could lose something. Oh, give me a goddamn break. Does it really matter whether they have a lot or a little on their card? I could write a character up that only has 1 or 2 abilities and have them be overpowered. It doesn't matter.
Well, look at Gast has
it doesn't matter how many words.
What does he have? One character play? Yeah,
It matters on how the abilities and the balance plays out. Now, the one thing I do see that could be a motivator on Decimate is Decimate with the 2-inch range was very difficult for some teams, i.e. teams that don't have a lot of 2-inch range, to counterattack. So this puts Decimate into a range of a counterattack. That counterattack can be important, but it's really only, and let me just lay out my thought on this. It's really only important in some situations. You can only ever counterattack a model once, right? Once against each enemy per turn.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only counterattack somebody, counterattack Decimate once. So now you've added in the ability for one additional attack, and Decimate generates so much momentum that even if you knock her down or push her away, she's going to be right back in. Her dodge is going to allow her to go base to base with you, so you're not knocking her very far away on the counterattack. Number two, if you knock her down, she's just going to momentum stand back up and keep attacking you. So that's why, again, I'm not sure it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well, and at the end of the day, this one, more than any of the others, is probably the one where I will agree. It's like, I don't think the world would have noticed had it not been there. But I don't think that the world is any worse for it being there. It's like it's such a splitting hairs change.
And if there wasn't so many other changes, then making a change that's a splitting hair change, I think would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of other changes. So some of the
it just adds into the union's the union's perception. Sure, I totally get that.
Let's move on to our next one, Hemlock. 66% of this change I agree with.
All right, what's the one that you don't like?
I don't understand why a chick with a big damn stick has a 1-inch melee range.
Well, it's not that big of a stick. All right, so
I mean, that's it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. She's not out there to attack.
Mm-hmm.
But I
think the reason she got a 1-inch melee zone, honestly, like the defense 5 and slippery is a cool combination. I think that the 1-inch melee zone has a lot to do with making her no longer useful as a tackler.
and I would disagree because she still has a 1 success tackle.
Well, but that can now be countered by every player she tries to tackle.
Okay, that's fair. I can see that.
So that is, Jamie and I didn't talk about that, but I'm sure that's why she now has a 1-inch melee zone, because she was not meant to be a ball, a ball handler.
Right.
And even though they took away her tanking by going to defensive 5, if she still had the 2-inch melee zone, then she would be able to very effectively extract balls, and then with her reasonably high kick, she still got that 3-6 kick, she's still got a lot of move. she would be able to go get balls and move them onto other players.
But you know what amuses me about this, Phil? And this is where I'm so schizophrenic on these changes.
Yeah.
And look, I'm saying it before anybody else does. I'm really not trying to be a pain in the ass here, but when I go through these changes, that's the other thing. Like, inconsistency annoys me, and all of this seems also, overall, when I look at everything, inconsistent, right? Okay, so we took somebody who was defense 6, amazing moves, 6'8", really good kick, 3-6, right? Momentous tackle on 1 success, and able to do all these great effects to screw with people. And they said, she's not supposed to be a frontline player. She's not supposed to be a ball hog to go grab the hog and act like a striker. She's supposed to be a second-line harassing character.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, and I saw this in play because I also played her yesterday in a game against Engineers. Okay, so you drop her to a 5 defense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes her a 5 defense way better than the 6 defense. I completely agree there. And yet at the same time, well, I shouldn't say way better than the 6 defense, not way better. Because I still saw players yesterday, when the player that was playing against me, specifically make choices to go after other people on my team because they weren't confident in getting the 5s.
Mm-hmm. No,
right?
Sure.
Second, with a 5, now this was just me. I'm not sure the drop from 6 to 5 is enough to take her out of the front line, especially with Slippery, since she can disengage.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's go directly to that, back to what you just said. A 1-inch melee zone, but now everybody can react to her. However, your reaction, one, if she's trying to walk away from you, she's still back up to a 6. So you're not doing anything against her. 2, you're trying to react to her in the 1-inch. The chances of you hitting her on the 5s still is not highly likely. And she still took the ball from you and is kicking it with a 3-6 kick. So what did they really change? Like, this is one where I say they didn't go far enough to meet the object of what they were trying to do.
And that's possible. You know, when we discussed what we needed to do to Hemlock in the past, my suggestion at the time was to kill her kick stat, because I was seeing her used as a secondary striker. Now, the argument that was given to me against just killing her kick stat was, well, she's still, it's not so much her kicking that's the problem, it's her tanking that's the problem. And I do agree that a 5 defense is still not exactly a difficult player to tank with. And, you know, even though she's very squishy, you know, I mean, Harmony would definitely tell you that she's tougher than her.
Yep.
But I think that the effect here, I think, is that the risk is just slightly higher now. And it is slightly like,
higher.
How bad do you want to make Hemlock, I guess is the question, right? Like,
so if I go, and I'm purely going in the comments now, I looked at Hemlock and thought that she was bordering silly. I didn't think she made it into silly, but I thought she was bordering silly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure personally I play her any different now than I did before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure the 6 to a 5 in the 1-inch range made a difference, because I just don't think. Now, had you moved my 6 to a 4,
mm-hmm.
or had you moved the 6 to a 5 and dropped the kick to like a 2-5 or a 1-6 or a 2-4 or something like that, had you moved my movement around, maybe drop me to a 5 defense and drop the 1-inch range, but make my movement a 5-7.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think I'm playing her in the second line as a harassing person who's just throwing poison clouds and blind around. But the reality is, I mean, let's look this through. Somebody has the ball, and I'm worried about dealing with them. So what do I do with Hemlock? Well, first I blind them for 1 influence. Then I walk up to them and take the ball with my momentous tackle. And then I dodge
away.
Walk
away at -4 attack.
Or I walk away at -4 attack against my 5. You're not hitting me.
Yeah.
And then I kick and score the goal with my momentum I just picked up.
Yeah. I understand.
So
I understand. She doesn't.
As good of a striker now as Mist is now. I'm sorry, I don't have an 8-inch kick like strikers.
Yeah. No, so I mean, yeah, she's still. But see, that gets back to my question. It's like, how bad do you want her to be? Like, is the intention to go from an auto include to a conditional? Is the intention to go from an auto include to just a good player? You know.
But that's the question, right? Isn't that why they made these changes? Is to take these quote unquote auto includes down to just good players?
Yeah. Well, and I think that I don't know. Part of me thinks that there was probably a reluctance to go too far with anybody. Like, you don't want to overcorrect.
And I get that.
And so, it's entirely possible that a year from now we're talking about another change to Hemlock. But it's a process, right? It's a process. This is a brand new game,
It's Hemlock on the Hunter team.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know what that's going to be.
So that moves us into our first buff, Catalyst.
All right. So, let's just go ahead and talk through the 5 big guys, because I've got them all kind of squashed next to each other. So Catalyst at defense 3 and armor 1 is no longer the vending machine or turnstile or easy takedown, which I never understood why a 29 health player was an easy takedown until you see him knocked out in one turn. He's going to stay around a lot longer. There's no doubt about that.
Now, this is what really informs me. I haven't played The Alchemist yet, so I haven't really played around with Catalyst. Mm-hmm. But what completely informed me on this was I mentioned this to one of the Alchemist players and a guy who was just getting into Alchemist yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them went, oh my God, that's awesome. He's going up to armor 2?
No.
So the fact that they also didn't know their own character means they also weren't
playing him. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can't talk one way or the other. I think the changes look good. You're buffing a guy that I've heard repeatedly is not being
consistently underplayed.
Does this fix him for you? Is this enough?
Well, all right. So let's step back a little and look at these. I want to say one thing about the 5 big guys in general, and Catalyst falls into this group. I think what may have happened with the big guys is not that they needed to become tougher. I think that there was an expectation among the players that these players work differently than the designers intended. I don't think that the idea of throwing a player alone, unsupported, and inadequate to the task forward into a line of opponents just because he's a huge chunk of metal on a 40 millimeter base and having a reasonable expectation that that player will still be standing at the end of the turn was ever in the design. But we've consistently for the last 9 months seen people bellyache about Catalyst, Brick, Colossus, Fangtooth, all these guys whose avarice, all these guys whose role was never go into the middle of the field and take a bunch of damage. They were big models. They're on a big base. They look imposing, but they're not meant to take on 3 opposing players and just stand there and take it.
So here's what I will find interesting. In the case of all, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 of these big players, right? So, and you know what? I just realized, Phil, we haven't mentioned the other 4. So let's talk about Catalyst is getting...
Catalyst is defense 3, armor 1.
Yep. Colossus, over on the Engineers, gains a 2nd armor, so he goes to 2 armor. So there's your 2 armor guy.
Yep.
Brick, who's already sitting at 2 armor, gains tough hide.
Yes.
Avarice, who already has tough hide, gains 1 armor.
Yep.
And Fangtooth, you're going to have to explain this one. Fangtooth gains Gluttonous Mask.
All right, so Gluttonous Mask is Clone Junior. It's basically the playbook negation of Clone without the dodge part of Clone. So the way that Gluttonous Mask works is the first character play or playbook result against Fangtooth or whoever has the ability, each turn is ignored.
Right. Now, we should also say this is the new clone.
Yeah, this is the new clone.
Later on our list.
And it is not, there is no word may. That was an unintended...
Right.
That was an unintended wording. It was always meant to be the first instance of. And so both Gluttonous Mask and Clone have changed to reflect that.
So the first time basically, in a turn, this model gets attacked, you ignore the attack. The first time a character play goes against them, you ignore the character play.
Right.
And not both. Right?
No, it is either or.
So, okay.
Yeah, and it's very cool. I played with this yesterday. It forced the butcher player I was working against to deal with it. It wasn't that they couldn't deal with it. It didn't change a lot, but he had to deal with it. I mean, there was an occasion that I can specifically remember where his goal, because Fangtooth always, anytime Fangtooth sees boar, Fangtooth runs up the boar. That's just what he does. And so, because alone, without any support, if Fangtooth and boar are alone on the field, Gluttonous Mass negates boar.
Yes. Because
he can't charge while engaged. He's not going anywhere because of foul odor. And that one influence just goes away on triggering Gluttonous Mass. So there was a point where Rob wanted to knock down or push Fangtooth out of the way for Boiler to run through and get the ball to Brisket, who had just come back onto the field on the edge of the field and was pretty much clear to run on goal at that point, unfortunately. And that's sideline repairs card, man. It caught me off guard. So what he ended up doing was, after he had passed the ball to Brisket with Boiler, he actually had Boiler come back and just throw a swing at Fangtooth to trigger Gluttonous Mass. I mean, it was a good, it was good tactics. It was thinking about this ability correctly, and that freed up Boar to hit him and knock him down.
Right.
So it's a cool ability. I think, all these other ones where you're just getting a defense, you're getting an armor, you're getting tough hide, that's an ability the other people already have. This is a new, interesting ability that has some new tactical aspects to it. So, and Fangtooth, one thing I will say for Fangtooth is he always lacked a toughness. You think Fangtooth is this guy who can't feel any pain, can't feel, fearless, painless, and is, in theory, the perfect tank. But then really all he's got going for him is a large health pool.
Right. 29 health.
Right.
Yeah.
And with this, he's just a little more tanky. And I think at the end of the day, they're all a little more tanky because we never learned how to play the game right. And ultimately, Steamforge gave that.
Right. They haven't. These are interesting changes to me. Mm-hmm. Now, let me just say up front, the Fangtooth thing, since I have Fangtooth and he goes in almost all the teams, now that I have all the teams, except for engineers, I think this is great. And I think these changes are great to get these players into the game, because I agree, they aren't played. A lot of people leave the big guys out. In fact, funny enough, the only one I don't see here that got a buff is Kraken. I mean, I know there's other big guys that didn't get a buff, but Kraken is the one I think that I also hear a lot that didn't get a buff. Now, that said, yes, I'm going to acknowledge here's two Union players who both got a buff. I hear everybody out there throwing things at my voice, but these 5 changes, right? Since nothing was taken away from these characters, I really wonder, and I'm going to be interested to watch. It's a positive change to me because it gets them into play, and then once they get into play, how quickly do people start learning what they were intended to do from the beginning? Because I think all the ones I've had experience with, I've started to see the uses of them before they got this buff. Mm-hmm. So this just makes, to me, what were good players better. And I think that's going to be an interesting change to the game. These 5 changes, I think, are where we're going to see the biggest impact of this errata long-term, changing how the game is played. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where, I don't know where the cart and the horse are in relation to each other, yep. And it could be the fact that they just gave up on all of us not knowing how to play them.
Fine. You're all idiots. Here, have a buff.
Or it could be that, because my arc with big guys was back in beta and early retail. When I saw a big guy on the field, I just never even swung at them because I was like, oh, I can't do 27 points of damage. Like in 3 turns, I can't do 27 points of damage. Then I learned 2 things. Number 1, you can get a lot of momentum off these guys. And number 2, you can do 27 points of damage.
Right.
And, the 2 things you could say is, the two lines of thought that you could follow in this is, number 1, how similar was the sort of the playtest arc to my arc, and at what point did they decide that yes, you can do 27 points of damage? Because if it took play test a little while to realize that you could benefit from going ahead and engaging and beating on these big guys. Because if health pool was initially the deterrent, at what point did that stop being a deterrent for everyone? So you could come at this from a bunch of different directions, and you could come up with a bunch of different conspiracy theories, and ultimately the one that feels right to me is simply that we're all kind of dumb.
See, and what amuses me about this is my arc was very different from yours. I'm playing the Masons. I have brick, and I'm going to stop playing brick because my regular opponent knows that if you park 2 inches away from brick and engage them, I lose a bunch of my effectiveness. Okay, fine. And then I started putting them back in when I realized I'm getting extra influence off them, and I need it for my Masons.
Right.
I move into Union, and I sort of, I won't say perfect, but definitely hone the edges of this brute squad concept that I've written about on the blog for both the Masons and the Union. I have never had the Union brute squad with, I think it's 7 influence. I can reliably put out 27 points or 22 points of damage in a turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then add a little bit of influence to that, which is not too much to ask. And suddenly I'm churning out 29, 30 points of damage in a turn. I never was intimidated by big health blocks. It was more about, what's going to minimize that. Now, I'll tell you this, after playing against Colossus yesterday with Armor 1 and Tough Hide, Armor 2 and Tough Hide really puts a crimp in my damage dealing.
Yeah. No, Colossus is now, and the other thing about Colossus, just in the last show, we talked about how Colossus is an amazing
really
defensive player and how he confounds strikers. Armor 2 on Colossus is amazing for that, because how many strikers have the tack to not only get through his 2 points of armor, but then to get through his close control. Right. Colossus is now probably the best ball holder in the game, even with a 2 armor. A 2 defense.
I agree.
Because you now need essentially 4, you need 2 successes twice to get the ball away from him. And if he's out of range of your high-tack players, which arguably is where he's supposed to be, he's going to be really hard to get the ball off of.
And Armor 2 and Tough Hide means that even your high-tack players coming in, while they're going to be able to damage him, it's going to take longer now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a longer tie-up where he's tying up these guys that, I think Fangtooth and he fall into a very interesting mold to me where they just went from kind of tanky to really tanky.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. No, I think Colossus made out like a bandit in this. Brick's Tough's Hide, he's going to stay around a little bit longer, but everybody's still going to do the same things that they were doing to him.
Right.
Avarice's defense, Catalyst's defense, you're still probably going to take exactly the same number and the same types of swings. Colossus and Fangtooth actually probably negated some outcomes. And those are, I think those are the 2 that did best of the big guys.
So... coming out of the big guys.
Back to the little guys.
The change that I think is the least necessary in period.
Mm-hmm.
Just period.
Mm-hmm.
Missed taking away Momentous on his 1 success tackle.
Yeah. I can't expressly disagree with that, because at the end of the day, he's still just a tiny bit not Flint, right? Like we could have that argument all day whether Flint or Mist is better, because really they're kind of in a rarefied air of their own. And this makes him a little bit less even in that argument.
So I came to this realization this morning, actually. I was thinking about this a little bit before we recorded. I'm intrigued, and I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and give the Steamforge guys the right answer. Okay? Which is, this change was made for fluff. Not for balance, not for anything else, for fluff.
Okay.
I think that's the answer they should go with. and here's why. Every other answer I think is meaningless. Before, you're right. Mist, and this is why fluff makes the right answer. Mist, before this change, Mist and Flint were really close. And the thing that set Flint just a bit above really was close control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, there's a clear gap, right? It used to be like Flint was like first place and Mist was like place 1.1.
Right. It was his defensive 5 was what made the argument exist.
Right. And defensive 5 versus close control, back and forth, and it was like 1 and 1.1. Now it's clearly Flint is the best striker, number 1. Mist is clearly number 2, and everybody else has moved from number 2, 3, 4 down to 3, 4, 5. They've all moved down a place.
Yeah.
And from a fluff reason, since the fluff talks about kind of points to Flint being the best striker in Guild Ball, okay, cool. I get it. You didn't want to have the argument about could there be somebody that's almost as good as Flint?
Well, I'm sure there's some fisherman players out there who are angry at us right now, but get used to it. So the
numbers all day long. The numbers show that Flint is better than any of the.
I know. I'm trolling the fish, which is an appropriate turn for us. The mechanical reason that I can see behind this is that I suspect that there was a desire for Mist to not be able to easily score with the first activation of the turn because of why, and so I think that there may be something in that argument that I'm sure you could shoot a million holes in just looking at his list, because 2 of the 3 teams that he plays for already have the ability to score in the first activation of a turn. And if you're just targeting it at Morticians, then, does that hurt everybody else?
But let's drop back to that. I want to point this out.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 teams, 4 out of 7 strikers. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3. 3 out of 7 strikers, almost half the strikers out there, because there's 7 strikers. 3 out of the 7 have the ability, with no pass, no additional movement, purely on their own, to score on the first turn.
Mm-hmm.
The additional 4, including velocity, the worst striker in the game from a threat range, can all score by just passing the ball to them.
Right.
I'm sorry, passing the ball and using the 4-inch dodge.
Yeah.
I played several games because I was doing demos with Angel yesterday. And Angel, the fisherman striker, who comes in 5th place overall of threat ranges, is so easy to do even with the demo cards.
Mm-hmm.
Because you give her, what was it? On the demo cards, it's not Gut and String, a Title Surge. You Title Surge her 2 inches forward, and suddenly she's within the 20-inch range.
Yeah, but the thing is with Mist, I don't think it's trying to make him not able to score in the first turn. I think it's trying to make him not able to score in the first activation. Right. So he's an influence short of doing that.
Right. So you took Mist at 22 inches score in the first activation, and now only 2 of the models can score in the first activation, Flint and Friday.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sorry, and now all 7 can still score in the second activation.
Well, but I think that points to this isn't a reason to be upset, because this is also a hair-splitting change.
Well, I agree.
But I think somebody's going to be upset about it. And you can make the argument that it's unnecessary, but...
Except from a fluff reason.
Well, not just a fluff reason, but I think also you just get back to the intention of what the player is supposed to be. Is Mist meant to be an opportunistic late turn scorer instead of an aggressive early turn scorer. I mean, there is something to be said for a player's role.
You got to ask the same question about Flint, about Friday, about Vitriol.
Yeah, well, it's. I don't know. I mean, I would again, much like Decimate,
tackle on
right?
one.
Much like Decimate, if you didn't make this change, I would never notice. You do make this change, and I'll admit, I played Mist yesterday. I got 2 goals with Mist yesterday against Tenderizer, mind you, which is a discussion for another time because I have solved Tenderizer. I get 2 goals with him, and I don't. There was one turn where I activated Mist 1 activation later than I would have because I wanted to have the momentum in hand. And it didn't stop me from scoring.
So here's a great one for you. Here's my Mist. And again, funny, you and I did very similar things yesterday.
Yeah.
So in my actual full-blown game, I also, so I activated Mist, and here's how I played different. Mist starts the turn engaged or needs to move in. It didn't matter in this case either way, right? Needs to move in or starts engaged with the person who has the ball. So normally I would give Mist my normal 4, the 4 influence that he can take. Why would I do that? Well, I would do that so that I can sprint, I can tackle, I can then spend an influence to do where they go and bounce out, and then the influence to score.
Right.
Okay, good. So what do I do different? I sprint, I use an influence to attack and tackle. Oh, and then I use an influence to attack and trigger where they go to get my momentum anyways. Right?
I just didn't do the where they go part. I just took
shot while you were engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I had both of my goals were 2 die goals with Tenderizer within 4 inches of the goal. I needed a 5 to hit it. I rolled well twice.
Right.
But you know what? At the end of the day, like when I did the math, it wasn't, this sucks that Miss can't do XYZ. It was just, it's 1 dice left. And actually, no, I take that back. The first one I did bonus time. So he still had his 3 dice. The second one, I just said, screw it. This is for the win. I'm rolling 2 dice.
For me, this is a change. What upsets me about this change is not the change itself. It's the fact that it seems to me to be change for change's sake or change for people who think this is going to make a difference. And, it so isn't going to make a difference. I don't know that the outcry was so vociferous on Mist. I don't think, Mist isn't gutter. People loved to hate Mist. People just hate gutter. Yes. Which is funny because in my local group, people hate Rage way more than gutter.
Yeah, Rage. When this game came out, I thought Rage was going to be the player that broke the game, and now I'm like, yeah, Rage. He's a nice model.
See, I love Rage, but I get a lot of really good use out of him.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Let me get back to being positive. See, so there was my negative. So far I've been negative, ambivalent to negative, positive, negative. Yeah. Let's go back. So let's talk about. We're going to mix up our list here a bit, Phil, but we'll come back. Let's talk about.
We have 2 different lists, so you just lead when I'll follow.
Okay, well, I think I'm using your list. So
well, but I changed my list around.
Let's go with gutter. So gutter.
All right,
gutter. We've changed chain grab.
Mm-hmm.
So now chain grab no longer does damage. That's the only change. Same, everything else is the same. It just doesn't do damage.
Right.
And the other thing, where did it go?
Life Drinker is now
a Life Drinker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Life Drinker now only heals 1 instead of 2 hit points on a damaging hit. I'm so ambivalent about this change in relation to how she works overall, except for the fact that the change, chain grab was her damaging ability for 1 influence, blah, 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 blah. And when you put her, and again, this is what got me. Mm-hmm. When you put her with the Ox in his plays, then suddenly everybody's using her as the damage thing to do 3 to 4 damage. Okay, give me a break. You just, again, so in the one specific situation with this one other player on a team that she mercenaries into, that's where the problem comes up?
Well, I think that's where the problem became visible, right? Like, I think the underlying issue here is simply that chain grab was a 2-for-1. It did damage and it repositioned the model.
And it healed you.
So 3-for-1, really. So yeah, it was doing 3 things for 1 influence. That was a lot. It still does 2 of those.
No, it only does 1 now. It just repositions you.
No, oh yeah, that's right. You don't get the life share. Yes, good point. Yeah. I'm not paying attention.
And again, it was stacked, right? It healed her because she did damage. It did damage because damage was built into this, and it was a reposition. Right. I don't know. Maybe this is again a personal thing. Clearly, I must have been playing wrong, even with my grossly effective union. God, I got to find a way to stay for this tournament in St. Louis.
Yeah.
But the reposition was always the most important part of this. So I am ambivalent about losing the 1 point of damage. Okay, yeah, big deal. The second thing is the heal. Well, whether you're healing 1 hit point or 2 hit points, I think it's really immaterial because the answer is you always kill Gutter if you can.
Right. Well, and the thing is that the heal was broken with chain grab because she could heal 8 per turn, which allowed her to heal 13 per turn, which was way more than anybody else.
Yeah, which Jamie
and honestly
said, they dropped it down because it's supposed to be this heal and then Hemlock's heal and then a momentum heal.
Right. I will say honestly, both Gutter's Life Drinker and Boar's Regeneration both confound me. I've never understand why those 2 players can heal each other. If it's a fluff reason, I don't see the fluff to support it. There's no reason to make Boar harder to kill, and there's no reason to make Gutter harder to kill. Right? Like this is like the Life Drinker change. This is one I disagree with because I think it should have just been Life Drinker no longer exists. But okay. For whatever reason they wanted to just limit. I mean, there's clearly it's part of that player's identity. And if it's a part we just don't know yet,
or I think it's partly supported by the fluff, right? I mean, when she was being misused, she surprisingly lived through all of the foulness that was being passed around the pirate ship.
I don't know. I don't. I mean,
it's a reach, but
yeah, okay. It's okay. Yeah, but as far as changes go, this is the one where I would be more draconian. With this one. So I think that there will be people who look at this as like this huge nerf, and in a very specific combination it is. And I definitely understand the blame Ox, just change Ox instead, like go to the underlying problem argument.
But I'm trying to
and I've made that argument. No, I've absolutely made that argument. I've said in public, why don't you just fix Ox instead? And at the end of the day,
so here's what amuses me, Phil. Here's what amuses me about Jamie's explanation.
Yeah.
So let's walk through this logic. His logic is this was broken because I give Gutter 4 influence. She proceeds to, whether she walked first or not, she proceeds to throw her chain using 1 dice for the 1 influence that she's going to spend for the chain. She rolls 1 dice to hit, and because Ox is nearby and she's been tooled up, she does 4 points of damage and pulls somebody into the 4 inches in. And then she proceeds to throw it again using 1 dice. So she makes 4 attacks using 1 dice.
Yeah, but I think somehow
that's the smart play.
No, but the tight fossil on this is not to pull her in. one thing that another aspect of this is that this is a ranged attack. It's not a long range attack, but it's a ranged attack. And one thing she can do is choose not to pull. Yeah, it's a push. So a push is, you do not have to move around a push. So this is a play that is not counterable.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand.
That can be stacked. That gives health, that gives momentum.
But if I'm trying to kill somebody, why am I attacking somebody for 4 damage a turn with 1 dice when I could do it once with 1 dice and then be throwing 5 dice and make sure that I'm doing even more damage?
Well, and at that point, you just have to answer that it's an outsized return. It's simply an outsized return. It's an awful lot. Even at a risky 1 dice play, that's an awful lot in return. I mean, for a play that you can throw, 4 times a turn. Like, do you think that this version is better than once per turn, still doing 1 point of damage? So
I'm very glad, as somebody who plays Getter, I'm very glad they didn't, because I heard rumors they really make chain grab once per turn.
Yeah,
that would actually worry me, because then if I fail that first one, with my 1 or 2 dice, I can't try it again. And I had times last night I had to throw that 1 dice at somebody. I mean, I used 3 out of my 4 influence to get somebody pulled into where I wanted them, because that was the most important part, was pulling somebody in. Right. So I'm very happy they didn't do once per turn, but I'm just trying to envision the scenario where using chain grab 4 times instead of, successfully using chain grab 4 times to do damage is somehow better than using chain grab once and then my tack 3 times.
Well, it may not have been better, but in terms of damage output, but it certainly would have been better in terms of in terms of preventing reaction. It would have been better in terms of the ratio of life recovered to damage dealt would be a lot higher, because you could be getting 8 in return and only dealing 4. I just come back to it. I don't feel like chain grab was a play that was breaking the game. I feel like chain grab was just a play that was doing way too much for what it was supposed to be. Like, at the end of the day, you feel like, scything blow is supposed to be her damage dealer.
Right.
And that's sort of the amount of damage she's supposed to do.
But she still did. Yeah, I hear you. I guess it just, to me, it's I've never been in that situation where, I've found that to be the play, especially since she has a momentous 1 point of damage on her first success, right? Yeah. She's a damage dealer. I'm not sure. I really am ambivalent about that 1 point leaving and stuff. I'm not sure the logic behind it.
And that's why I don't think that it was a case of chain grab being some broken combo ability that was doing a ridiculous amount of damage. I think it was just the return on investment was crazy high.
Right. And now you actually have to sit at 2 inches to get the same return on investment.
Right.
Well, half as much. Let me rephrase that. Half as much return on investment. Because now with the attack and your 1 success, now you're getting momentum and you're healing 1 point of damage every time you swing. So your healing over the turn went down to, what is it? It's 3 plus. You get 7 now instead of getting.
Right.
So, okay. Wow.
All Clone. Clone is...
We kind of covered this
It's
a bit.
both the clarification and a nerf. The clarification part is the accept while advancing clause, which gets to the bigger issue of trying to make sure that there's no ability in this game that allows for a reposition move during a parting blow, because they are just stupid. and
if we just to point out, right, this was something that's already in the. This is more of a clarification overall. This is something that's actually already in the parting blow rules.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. Parting blows do not generate momentum points regardless of the playbook result. Parting blows may not generate a push or dodge result or trigger a character play.
Right.
And really what that was supposed to say, so you couldn't trigger clone on a parting blow to begin with, and you weren't able to push or dodge somebody off of a parting blow.
But
now
people were arguing that because it was a sustained ability, it wasn't triggering the ability. It was an ability that was already there. And so this was just to clarify that.
And they're making that same change on like bricks push and mallets push and knockback. And so I think this is good that there's some additional clarification on the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And it clearly you can go to the rule book and see the intention from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's just clarifying that.
Yeah, this is a rule. This is a rule as intended.
Right.
Issue. Yeah, absolutely. Now the once per turn is a change. I mean, you can no longer do the little trick where you counterattack to reapply clone and just spend the whole turn negating attacks. And I think that's just I'm sure that Alchemist fans are going to be upset about it, but let's be honest, Midas is a little too slippery.
Best captain in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And he's still crazy slippery. He's still basically running away from 2 attacks a turn.
Right.
It just kind of gets back to there are obfuscated rules that exist within the design of Guild Ball that careful observation will always reveal. And one of them seems to be you can't deny something more than once a turn. Right? So if you look at Gluttonous Mask, it denies something once a turn. You look at Close Control, it denies something once a turn. Clone could, with reapplication, deny something more than once a turn.
Yep.
And so it wasn't inside of the envelope. It wasn't inside of that design rule. I don't know if it was ever intended to be that way, or if it was overlooked, or if it was something they didn't expect to become such a big deal, or maybe they just didn't realize that it was outside of that unspoken rule until after the fact. But clearly it's an outlier.
Well, and I think part of where it was missed was really with the counterattack stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's within counterattack, they wanted to allow people to use their cool character plays as a counterattack.
Right.
But not generate momentum. Okay, cool. And then suddenly Clone is there, which is a cool character play that can also trigger.
Right.
Right, off a guild
triggers too many times.
Right. Oh crap. So it's sort of like now it's much nicer, and it's like where'd they go and everything else. I think that was a great change.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the poor fish.
Poor fish.
Poor fish.
I never thought I would hear you say that. So
they are crocodile tears, believe me.
So gut and string.
I get it. I totally get it. It's an outsized outcome. I mean, you can if you devote Shark to the same action, for the turn, he can still gut and string a bunch of players. He just can't do it all at once. And
so you and I don't think we did this in the recording. We talked about this before we recorded. Yeah. I believe, if not, everybody hears the story twice.
That's all right. I will have forgotten it at least once.
I never thought about this before, but I have experienced it. I'm going to go back to my friend Maurice, pundit in the area. Mm-hmm. There was a great comment where one of the guys yesterday, after facing Maurice with his fish, I was talking about this change, and he goes, "Oh, thank God, because it would be nice if he gut and stringed the guy he was targeting ever."
Okay, that's a very fair observation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Maurice rolled in, because I've seen him do it to me, where he rolls in he finds some cluster within the range and rolls in, and if he comes back and actually gut and strings the model he's targeting, that's great. But he proceeds to use a 2+ or a 3+ defense to gut and string everybody else that's in range.
Yeah.
String the team. It's nice that now, and you know what? I always felt it was something I just had to learn to play around. This makes it so I don't have to learn to play around it. So thank you for making the game easier for me.
Oh, good. Anytime, Bill.
Well, that thank you was really for the Steamforge guys, Phil.
Okay.
Like,
well, I speak for the trees.
Yeah.
So it's
an understandable.
It's an understandable change, and it's the same with seduction. It was possible. All right, so yeah, so the thing about seduction is that there was this way to get 8 momentum for 4 influence, and some people have known about it for a while. A few people have used it.
Yeah, I am not one of those.
Right. And I've not been telling anybody how to do this because I thought it was gross and I didn't want anybody to do it. So the way to get 8 momentum with 4 influence from Siren is, well, there's actually 2 ways to do it, but the easiest way to do it was to walk up to somebody. You take a swing at them. And of course, this is one of those abilities where you don't have to swing at the person who does the thing, right? Because you can just trigger it.
You can swing at a 2+ guy and then hit somebody else 6.
Right. So even though her attack was only 3 and she needed all 3 hits, right? She needed all 3 hits to make this work.
Or all 4, yeah.
The 3. Her double guild ball was on the 3rd
3
column.
successes on 4 attacks.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can you walk up to the 2+ guy, you roll a hit, you trigger your double guild ball result, that gives you a momentum, triggers seduction, you have somebody then attack you have the adjacent bad guy, then attack based on the seduction, triggering a momentous damage result. And then you repeat for 3 more times.
Just anything, right?
Yeah. So for 4 influence, you
get 8 momentum.
You get 8 momentum, plus you do whatever damage is commensurate with those 4 hits. So it was another case of, wow, that kind of is broken. And was it happening in every game? No. Was it happening in high-level games with very skilled players and kind of throwing off the tight balance of the game? Yes. And more importantly, was it really immensely pissing people off? Yes. And that's a game experience, much like Gut and String was kind of chalked up to being in some respects, a quality of play change. Seduction, therefore, because it has a wow, that kind of sucks possibility into it, really kind of falls into the let's just fix that and take that horrible thing out of the game. I can't disagree with this under any circumstances.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to me. I don't disagree with it at all. I'm a little sad because Siren has now dropped to, she only had 2 momentous things in her short playbook anyways. So it limits the use of one of her playbook results.
Yeah.
Which, that is a little bit interesting. It almost would be good if they gave her.
She's still got a lot of tricks up her sleeve. I mean, she's still instrumental to the way that you can get 6 takeouts with the fish.
Yeah, if I'm anticipating where the justified crying will be, that would be where I think it is. Well, you just took away one of my key areas to generate momentum, but. Yeah, you were probably generating too much. So
yeah, you were. You shouldn't have 8 momentum at the end of the turn, much less the end of one activation. All right, let's just accept that it was busted.
Says the guy who plays Midas.
You shouldn't have 8 momentum left at the end of the turn, much less the end of an activation.
Now, to be fair, anybody who plays Midas knows that that's true. He doesn't have 8. He usually has 11.
Right, because I'm sure he's done something with that momentum along the way.
Okay, so there are 2 fish changes.
And I think that they are both justified completely, and that's not just because I hate the fish.
Now, let me ask you this: Tough Hide. Tough Hide is getting a change.
Well, it's getting a clarification. This is purely a. We didn't word this to avoid a problem. This is a rules intended issue.
So the way it used to be worded was enemy plays that cause damage or playbook damage results targeting this model are reduced.
Right, and that was the problem. The word targeting should not have been there because it ignored Tough Hide on AoEs.
Yep.
And the intention was that Tough Hide was always in effect. There was no way to avoid Tough Hide.
Gotcha.
So that's a rules intended issue. That's not a balance thing. That's not a this is busted thing. It's we didn't word this right. It's there's a bunch of these that kind of fall into that. Tough Hide is that way. Burning Passion is that way. The stuff with obstruction was that way.
Yep.
So.
And that was the other one coming back. So Burning Passion, I know there was a lot of Burning Passion is an ability on Stoker. Tough Hide's on a lot of people. Burning Passion's on Stoker and on...
It's only on Stoker. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess Catalyst doesn't actually have Burning Passion. He just has sort of wording that gets him to the same effect.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, where he does extra damage.
One of his buffs from conditions. Yeah.
Right. So Burning Passion, there was a lot of question about... Burning Passion used to just say add +1 damage, and people were like, well, wait, do I get to now knock you down and do damage and do these other
things? And that was the problem. It was just an incomplete description.
Yeah. So they just clarified it to say when you do damage, now you do extra damage.
Yeah, yeah. So,
and I think that's all of our character changes. The other clarification we know is coming is obstructions.
Yeah, and that's just... I think Jamie did a good job of describing it. It just is trying to clear up some confusion over when the modifier applies to defense and when the modifier applies to movement.
I just want to point out with obstructions and Burning Passion, we're talking about those 2 at the end here. It brings to mind I got to play with my brewers the other day. I love Stoker.
Really?
Everybody else seems to hate him.
I can't figure out what he does.
He sets people on fire, Phil.
Well, yeah, I mean, he sets people on fire, and that is an obvious outcome. But I mean, it's just like everything else in that team is so sort of in the pocket, and then here he comes and he's like, "I set people on fire," and it's like, well, why do you set people on fire?
Because he's drinking alcohol and breathing fire. And,
well, I mean, I understand how, but I mean, why? From a tactical standpoint,
look, all I'm going to say is this: when you set the entire fish team on fire. And
they slow down a lot.
4 out of those 6 players get set on fire across two uses of influence, 2 actions of the same activation. It is a beautiful thing. And they slow way down, and suddenly the rest of the brewers are on top of them awfully quick.
Yeah, I guess that is sort of the consequence that I wasn't really thinking about with Stoker is that he's able to compensate for the slowness of the team. And I guess I hadn't really put that together.
And you can do now when you combine that with obstructions. Obstructions are better than any other type of terrain out there right now, because the other terrain you set it on fire, and since I know you can do that, you have to knock people into it. Obstructions. It's funny, models don't think about stopping within an inch of obstructions. And Stoker, with his magic brew, can walk in, set everybody on fire, including himself, and then just drink his magic brew. He's not on fire anymore.
Yeah. So, no, I need to give him another look for sure. Yeah. I think he's...
But that's not really part of the errata. But no. I thought it would be good to end with, I still love this game. I will end with this. I am not hugely positive about this errata. I see the necessary changes. I will adapt and move forward. I see a lot of unnecessary changes. I am really impressed that they made changes, that they're being responsive to the community. That is such a huge positive. It may even outweigh this over time.
Yeah, it's fair enough. And I, my take on the whole thing is ultimately like, I've been accused by certain individuals of being a Pollyanna, and Mostly it's just that none of this is going to make me not have fun playing this game. And I don't have a problem with change, right? Like, I don't, as long as you can tell me why you made a change, even if I don't agree with it, as long as I understand the why and I see the thought process behind it, and I think that you're honestly, trying to make, to keep the game fun, that's fine. I'm still gonna play the game, and that's that at the end of the day is ultimately all I care about. Is are you making the game worse? Because I've seen there have been games in the past where I've seen changes make the game really unpleasant, and this isn't that case. So I think it's.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think this is a drastically negative change or anything like that. I'm just not hugely positive. A lot of it I don't think was necessary.
And I will agree that some of it was marginal, but what I come away with, and I think I said this when I was talking to Jamie P. I don't remember, so I'll say it again, is that what we don't see on this list is a core rule that needed to be changed. Like the game,
which is impressive.
Yeah, the game is fine. What we're changing here and what we're arguing about for an hour, what all these changes are going to be arguing about is how 6 skills were implemented. Right? Like step back and have a little perspective here. The game is like 92% fine. That's pretty good for a brand new game.
I don't disagree. Yeah. I don't disagree with that specific sentiment.
Yeah.
Sentiment. Yeah, I think that's Errata.
All right, good. Here we are with the second installment of our How to Beat the team overviews, and this time we are going to talk about the Morticians, because they are a team that I certainly have a lot of trouble beating, and maybe it's just that it seems like all the best players I know really love the Morticians. There may be a connection there. And speaking of really good players, we're joined for this one by Mr. Jamie Perkins, who is certainly no slouch when it comes to playing. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing good. I'm just wondering when this good Mortician player is going to join us.
Yeah. Well, we assume more than we know, perhaps. So,
I would say I really enjoy playing the Morticians.
Yeah. Well, they are your stated team of choice, which is saying something, given that you arguably have as much experience with the game as anybody. So, what is it that? Well, I guess before we get into the meat of the conversation, what exactly is it about the Morticians that you like so much?
So if we sort of taking card gaming analogy into this world, into the model world, let's talk about what kind of team they are, and they're very much a control team. So they're at home when they are striking a good balance between taking your players out in melee, or just straight taking your players out of the game. So they can do that in a number of ways. Singling players out by dragging them away from their teammates and then beating them into the ground, or pushing them away from the melee the other way. So they'll if your characters have a fairly short charge range, you could just push them away or remove from the fight. So they basically lose an entire turn. It's really effective that when you can do that with a player that's got lots of influence stacked on them, but then they're just kind of on the fringes of the combat. You just push them away, and they're going to lose an entire turn of efficiency and all the influence that's on that player. So that a canny player, they have an attraction to skillful or finesse players, because the more skill you put, the more effort you put into running the team well, the more you'll be rewarded by a very strong team, because they scale quite well with you playing better with them.
Well, I suppose that explains why they were the 8th team that I painted. Because skillful player was never going to be my epitaph. So All right, so we've touched on it a bit then, but so let's go ahead and just run down the Morticians game plan. Specifically, what is it that they are trying to do to you?
So even though I wouldn't say that they're a particularly strong footballing team, they do have some very strong footballing sort of gimmicks and hidden synergies. So Puppet Master is the ability that you kind of learn to master first without throwing too many master words into that sentence. It's the ability to try and get your head around the quickest, because it opens up so many more options to you that, just looking at the base stats, the Morticians are a very bad footballing team. The best footballing stats they've got access to in their team is 4-7, which is on silence only when he stood near to dirge. Usually it's 3 6s if they're lucky. Most of them are sort of 2 6s or 1 6s. So they're on the really downside of footballing statistics. When you start throwing Puppet Master in there, you can turning enemy players into friendly players and having them pass you the ball using their probably better kick stats to pass to your players, and then having them count as friendly for that pass action, so that you can generate momentum points and activate pass and move and all those kind of things. They can sort of be very surprising football players if the situation happens to be correct for it. And it also means that they can make very good use out of their the one striker that they can access right now, which is Mist. Even though Mist is kind of alone in his footballing skills, they can make really good use out of him because he can be supported by the strong abilities such as Puppet Master. The main thing the Morticians are about, though, is they have some good fight to them, but they won't win a stand-up fight with people that are just better in combat than they are. So, the full bruising teams, the Brewers and the Butchers, in a straight stand-up fight, they will win it, 9 times out of 10 with the Morticians. So you can't win a straight-up fight with those teams. You have to use these control abilities, as I was mentioning before. So they have to really strike a balance between using their very decent melee ability, but recognizing when you are going to get beaten by somebody that is better at fighting than you are, and using your control abilities to supplement that.
Okay.
So,
all right. So let's then talk about some of their specific sort of play calling. What sort of movements on the field or combination effects are they going to be bringing on that you can sort of prepare yourself for? What are you watching for, and when you see X, you know that Y is coming.
Yep. Okay. So, the first thing you need to be aware of when facing the Morticians is if you can see Obulus and Cosset across the other side of the table, you know that they've got access to a very strong pull mechanic. So, with Cosset having access to Lore, which is range 8, and it makes your model move its base move directly towards Cosset, and then Puppet Master, which one of its uses is to make that player make a jog move. So, if you have Ox across the inside of the table, his base move is 5, so he can be moved 5 inches with Lore, and then another 5 inches with Puppet Master. So if you are not particularly careful with your players, the Morticians can single somebody out, pull them away from the rest of your players so they're unprotected, and then just beat them up on their own. So even though the Morticians won't necessarily win a 6-on-6 straight up fight, they can just cheat. They can just take your one player and have all 6 of them beat up on that one guy. So something to be aware of straight away. And there's things you can mitigate Lore with, because it's a direct towards Cosset move. You can have your players being stuck behind obstructions. Or being stood inside difficult terrain, because when they're being pulled, they're still going to take that difficult terrain debuff. In addition, what the Morticians will often do is try their perfect target is a 1-inch melee zone player that has already activated. Because if you have a player that's already activated, they can't activate again to protect themselves, unless you're the Masons who just cheat. But if there's a player that's already activated, they're very vulnerable at that point. They can't activate again to move backwards. They can't activate again to use that very nice cost 1 heal to heal themselves for 4 damage. They're perfect targets for the Morticians. So they can usually single that player out, drag them across the field, and they just beat them up, and they don't often have a chance to retaliate. So, if you make your early activations, if you're just careful about them, don't throw, if you make your early activations the slower moving players, for instance, if you've got, Boar or somebody else that's movement 4-6, if they go first, suddenly they can only be moved 4 inches each time that they're pulled by the Morticians, because it is reliant upon whatever your movement stats are. Also hiding your models behind obstructions, which I've already said. And then generally just trying to keep your players, together, trying to keep them in a bit more of a clump than perhaps you normally would, because the Morticians really love to single your players out, particularly the weak ones. Yeah, I think that's the first thing to be wary of anyway. I mean, in general, just make sure you read Puppet Master and that you know exactly what Puppet Master can do, because if you're not careful, it will really bite you in the behind.
Yeah, that is very true. Now, what would you say that the best sort of formation play against the Mortician is? Do you want to pull back? Do you want to go through their line? Do you want to try to spread out? What exactly are you trying to do?
I don't think you can really allow the Morticians to engage on their own terms, because while they're a team that want to, be in a fight with you and they want to be, having those melee combats, they want to be doing it with certain players at certain times. So if they engage with you on their own terms, they're going to send in Gast. Gast is going to come in first. He's going to be followed up very closely by Graves, Cosset, and Obulus, and it'll kind of happen in that order. So, Gast is going to come in first, and he, as people who've faced Gast before, is a very difficult player to deal with, with rising anger and fear. He's got very easy access to knockdown, a nice big 40mm base in a 2-inch melee zone, a decent attack stat. He's just a very difficult player to deal with. So the Morticians really want to send him in first. It's not necessarily easy to stop them from doing that, but if you are then pushing past Gast, don't allow him to engage all of your models at the same time. If you can get past Gast, to get into Silence, to get into Cosset, and prevent, Cosset in particular, actually, if you can prevent her from getting her free charge off, she loses a lot of her potency. And if you can get into Dirge and, if possible, take out Dirge before Cosset has a chance to attack as well, she loses a lot of her damage, because she causes more damage when she stood near to Dirge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't want them to engage on their own terms. You really, if you have the right team for it, you do want to get in their faces. If it's a little bit more difficult for teams like the Fishermen and I suppose specifically the Fishermen, but Fishermen and potentially certain Alchemist builds that don't really want to get stuck into a fight, bogged down. Ironically, it can be the safest place to be with the Morticians, because they don't necessarily want to be there either. They want to be, trading blows at a bit of a distance. So if they're in a bit more of a grindy fight, it's not the best place for them. That said, you have to kind of be careful about it. The Morticians are one of those teams where, the more that the controlling player knows about the Morticians, the better they're going to be. But at the same time, the more you know about what the Morticians can do to you, the better prepared you can make yourself.
Yep.
So,
which is the point of this series.
True. So I'll just keep talking then.
Right.
A really nice sort of basic advantage against, or basic tip against the Morticians is they are one of the teams that really dislikes knockdown. Obulus is somebody that's a very powerful character. He's very difficult to get hold of because of unpredictable movement. And if the Obulus player is playing against Butchers, he'll know to try and save that unpredictable movement for whenever Rock's activating and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if the earlier you can bring down Obulus, the better, and the easiest way to do that is by knocking him down. And Gast as well. In fact, generally the Morticians do not like to be on the floor because they can't easily generate momentum from a distance unless they're standing up to pull players in towards them. So the Engineers are particularly, often one of the slightly more difficult matchups for the Morticians, because they have a real hard time dealing with those ranged knockdowns.
Okay.
The Brewers can be problematic as well because they have a problem dealing with those multiple tough hide models. A Brewer needs to really get Hooper, Tapper, and Stave really in the face of the Mortician player. And if the Mortician player isn't set up right, for that advance, then they can real struggle to take any of those players out. Never mind all three of them. And then obviously the Brewers' best place is being engaged there. They're happy to be there already, and they can just start doing the knockdowns and then just go to town on the Morticians.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so let's talk about some specific players. Now we've talked about sort of been doing a lot of threats about Puppet Master. So what is the best way to defend against Puppet Master? Because I know that's losing the ball at every opportunity to Obulus is certainly a source of a lot of frustration for players who are newer to playing against the Mortician. So what are some good strategies for managing Puppet Master?
So you have some sort of safer and then some sort of safe ball carriers. So a safe ball carrier is somebody that has clone, because clone is one of those very direct counters to Puppet Master, and that it will just completely nullify the first time it's used for each turn. So if you have a ball carrier with access to clone and you're playing against the Morticians, you want to protect that ball, put it on the clone model, and get them to use clone. Provided they can't be hit by anything else, they should be relatively safe from Puppet Master for that turn. In addition to that, if you haven't got access to a clone player, putting the ball on your mascot is actually quite a safe place for it to be, because Puppet Master relies upon this kick stats of the player that has the ball. Most mascots have got kick stats of 1-4, so it really limiting the distance to which the Mortician player can accurately pass it, and then the accuracy of that that Puppet Master pass as well.
Yeah, that's one that I've heard on several occasions, is just give the ball to your worst player.
Yeah. Or your heavies as well. Your heavy players often have kick stats of 1-6. In addition to that, just dropping the ball in a safe place. The Mortician players are not, if Mist isn't on the field, or even if Mist is on the field just in the wrong place, dropping the ball in a safe location is a perfectly valid tactic. Just dropping it behind your players. Because if it's on the floor, Obelisk can't Puppet Master the ball itself. So even if he Puppet Masters the player that's next to the ball, he can either make it jog to snap the ball, but if he makes it jog, he then can't make it pass.
He can't make it pass, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So just dropping the ball is just as safe as doing that. So in terms of keeping the ball safe, there's 3 decent options for you there. Stick it on somebody with something like clone. Stick it on somebody that's too far away as well. It's just a pretty obvious one. But also just dropping the ball and having it on somebody with very poor kick stats.
No, that is those are good options. So how do you handle Ghast? Ghast is a player who is infinitely frustrating because of rising anger and fear together.
Yeah, Ghast I love. He's probably my favorite player. Even as much as I love Obulus, I think I like Ghast even more. So Ghast is kind of just printing money for the Morticians for every turn that he is engaged in a combat. So every turn that you strike him and don't kill him, he's generating 2 free momentum for the Mortician player, and he's technically casting misdirection on your team. You're losing an influence point every time that you attack Ghast and don't kill him. Because you're spending that extra one for fear. So if you're going to, therein lies the sort of the answer. If you're going to attack Ghast, make sure that you're going to kill him, or do so much damage to him that he's going to be taken out very soon afterwards. Because the faster you take him down, the less profit that the Mortician player is going to get out of those abilities. If you can't take him out, just try and keep him knocked down and pushed away from the combat as much as possible. If you can run away from him and spread out, then do that. That's not the worst option in the world. But generally, keep him knocked down, keep him away from the fight. And if he is knocked down, use the opportunity to just get away from him, because he isn't the quickest guy in the world either. He's only, he's 4/7 movement, so he's, there are faster players than Ghast.
No, and the other thing about Ghast is that you can't just ignore him. I mean, he's going to punish you if you just let him stand there. I mean, I saw him just the other weekend pretty much single-handedly win a game with the unmasking.
He can be, yeah. That's a play that doesn't get used very often, but when you find the perfect situation for it, it can be truly devastating.
Well, they had a 2 or 3 defense player on the ground.
Yep.
And it was in a little pack, and he took down like 3 players with like 3 or 4, I guess 3 uses of that ability, which you do generally see infrequently, but it just sort of underlies the fact that the Ghast can really dish out punishment if you don't account for him. So
I'll kind of walk you through 2 of Ghast's favorite activations. So Ghast's first favorite activation is to be within walking range of multiple enemy models. So if he's within walking range, he'll just jog up his 4 inches, and then he will just do 3 attacks. He only has to hit twice. So usually 3 times if you've got a point of armor. And he'll just get that momentous knockdown. First activation, right at the start of the turn. Nobody has any MPs. Walk into the middle of the team. Knockdown. 3 MPs to the Mortician. You've got 3 players on the ground, and you're all engaged by Ghast. It's perfect. It's exactly where he wants to be. Even better if they're 1-inch melee range models, because they can't stand up and hit him back.
Right.
So his second favorite activation is, if he's not within walking range of a fight, charging range of a low defense model, which you just mentioned. So let's say Stave or Boar. He charges into that model. If they're in the middle of their entire team, even better. So he'll charge in. If they haven't got any armor, he's quite likely to get a wrap, which means he can do the unmasking and that momentous knockdown. 2 MPs on the board again for the Mortician player. He's knocked that guy down, and then he's unmasking the entire enemy team. So you're then looking around. The Mortician player will then look around at those different push moves, see if you can really make the most of it. So he might unengage Ghast. He might choose to keep you engaged if you've got 1-inch melee ranges. He'll really remember that, because each push move that you do in Guild Ball is up to the distance.
Yes, so, I was actually going to point that out, that you can in fact keep people in range. You don't have to do that full 4 inches.
Yep. So people read the unmasking and go, why would I ever want to do that? I'm just going to push everyone out of melee with my guy that wants to be in melee. But those pushes are all optional. So you'll push them sort of to the edge of the effective range of the unmasking. If you've got 3 influence on you, you've spent 2 on the charge, you buy another attack on the model that is def 2 and on the ground, you'll probably throw one of your momentum boosts in as well, your momentum bonus times, and then you probably do the unmasking again and do 6 points of damage, to the whole team, and then get another momentum point back. So these are activations that Ghast really wants to take. He's a very, very straightforward and usually a great return on the first activation for the Morticians. So be wary of Ghast activating last on turn 1 and just running into a position where he's going to charge you next turn.
Well, now with Ghast, do you want to generally avoid attacking him if it's not either a case where you think you can kill him, which is not the easiest thing in the world because he is a 3-1 big guy, or where you're going to maybe be able to shove him out of the play?
So it's been difficult, this one, because it's a bit more sort of, you need a bit of context to it. But generally, I would advise against damaging him unless you absolutely have to. So, if you only have access to knockdown with damage, then fine. But the best thing to do with Ghast is knock him down and push him away. Don't damage him until you are going to kill him. Take him out, more accurately. If that's not possible, then just do what you have to do. But knocking him down is the priority. Knocking him down, or other control effects that you've got, blind, heavy bird, and those kind of things, they're all useful if you can do them. In fact, there's things we haven't even talked about. If he hasn't even got to a melee yet, and you can put one of those abilities on him that has minus movement penalties, that's also very good as well. In fact, it's probably just as good as knocking him down, if not better.
Yeah, blind or just get him on fire or something that's going to slow him down.
Yeah. Even better would be the character players that aren't conditions, so you can't just clear them.
Rabbit animal or blind. Or something.
So
like that.
It's interesting that even though the Morticians are a control team, they are vulnerable to other teams' control effects. So I've mentioned before the sort of the range pushback knockdowns from the engineers, other Mortician teams, and also some of the things the fishermen can do, dragging players around, gutting strings, those kind of things. So they're also in general, particularly Ghast, vulnerable to control effects.
All right. So what are you? What other players' nasty tricks should we look out for? I mean, we talked a little bit about countering cassette with either bases or terrain in the way.
I mean, just taking Cosset out early, I actually don't know the proper pronunciation for that. I probably should. It's Cosset or cassette. So just taking her out at your first opportunity. So, I mean, she is Def 4, but she only has 12 health boxes, and she's going to be causing damage to herself quite often. And she doesn't heal up very well. So if you damage Cosset and don't kill her, that's okay, because when she activates next, she's probably want to go crazy, and she's probably going to heal herself, which means that she's going to be, only healing 1 box aggregate, per activation. So even just putting some damage on her is going to hurt her in further activations. And generally taking her out early is going to be good for you, because she causes so much damage in return if she ever gets that, that perfect haymaker charge off on something
with the dirge support in place.
Yeah, for sure. She can do a lot of damage if you leave her alone. I think things to watch out. We've as we've said before we start recording, we've talked about Casket in a previous episode. So for information on Casket, listen to a previous episode of Guild Ball Tonight.
The only wrinkle there is that Casket time has been changed. Or will be changed in the very near future. And everything still applies. It's just that you probably won't be as worried about it being an alpha strike. It could just, it's now sort of something you have to worry about the whole game instead of something you have to worry about at the beginning of the game. So just keep an eye on Casket. Don't leave somebody who is bleeding out anywhere near him because he can he can grab those quick 4 victory points, and that
generally anything that is sort of average defensive stats and has 8 boxes or lower, that's kind of Casket's. That's where he wants to be, because he will, if he's got 4 influence on him, he's likely to cause about 8 points of damage, unless he spikes or has some other kind of help. Right. So try and heal your players up, and Casket, like Gast, is very, very vulnerable to control effects. So he hates being pushed back to knock down. He hates being blinded. Going back to Gast for a second, blind is a particularly good one because it doesn't target him, so therefore it doesn't trigger fear.
Oh yeah, as an AoE, sure.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, control effects on Casket. Big guy slow, so just keep him back.
Yep. Now, another thing with the Morticians is I feel like they are one of the teams whose mascot is a priority, because Dirge is able to support other players very well, and there's not an immediate downside to taking them out like there is with Princess or Marbles. So he always seems like, he's not necessarily easy to take out with that 5 defense, but and you may have to take him out several times.
It's true, yeah, because silence
can bring him back. But I do feel like given the chance, go ahead and take the time to knock out Dirge, just so that you don't have to deal with anybody getting singled out. Or Cassette getting that big boost from him.
So I sometimes refer to Dirge as the mobile attack buff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because he has that, the best mascots, the ones that you put very little or no influence into, efficiency-wise. Dirge is perfect for that because he's got that really nice 8-inch jog, although it's interesting to say jog when he flies, but 8-inch jog with flight, so he can go over players when he needs to, and he can really get that attack buff in the perfect place, especially when Cosset's involved, because he's also, applying his damage support, sorry. I think what's interesting about Dirge is where with loved creatures you really want to take them out at the end of a turn. With Dirge, you really want to take him out at the start of a turn because of Dark Doubt's taking the 4 MPs off you. Right. So if you take him out right at the start, suddenly that's not going to hurt you anymore.
You're only going to have what you got going up to that, sure.
So you probably have 1 or none going into him, or at the end of the turn when you really need them to win first turn, you probably have got 4 or 5 momentum points. Just taking them all away from you is really going to be painful. Really going to be painful. I mean, the flip side of that is Silence is going to have more opportunity to bring him back in the same turn, but I suppose this is only really going to apply to that first time that you want to take out the bird, because you are going to score those 2 victory points when you take him out the first time at least. So,
yeah.
After that, then whenever you can.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, that is at least when Silence is doing that, you've made them do something else with their momentum.
Yeah, it is. It's 2 momentum points to bring the bird back at the Dirge. I need to stop calling him the bird. Bird is the word. It is a big expenditure for the Morticians, who aren't necessarily a team that can generate huge amounts of momentum. And they're not really bad for generating momentum, but they're also not stellar for it either.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing that the Morticians kind of have going for them is that they're not a team that consumes a ton of momentum, but nobody is better for having had to spend momentum.
Yeah. I think the one turn that they really burn through it is the turn that Obulus uses his legendary play, because, there are really other good situations to use it, but my favourite time to use it is when Obulus is about to go and have a big melee turn where he's not going to use Puppet Master. So suddenly he can take all the opponent's momentum and use that as his own tack buff, so he kind of becomes tack 7 for the turn. He'll just spend it all straight away on doing that if he doesn't need to heal his players up. That's not something you can really plan much around, that legendary play, by the way, just because I've mentioned it. You can keep your momentum points low and heal. If you sort of spend your momentum as you generate it, which is a bit easier for teams like the Brewers who have access to nice heroic plays. But if you're sort of generally healing your players and clearing conditions when you earn it, keeping 1 or 2 on the board, then you're limiting there's no sort of, this is the perfect time to use a legendary play, use it now moment. You're making it a very difficult choice for them.
Right.
Other than that, there's not really. You just have to accept it's going to come at one point, and there's not really a huge amount you can do with it, apart from just spending it whenever you see an opportunity to spend some momentum that's going to benefit you. Do it.
Yeah, and that kind of gets back to, one of the points that we made on the previous installment when we were talking about playing against the butchers. I think also applies to perhaps equally well against the Morticians, because they're not necessarily spending all their momentum, and they have ways to take your momentum or otherwise imbalance the momentum. Is just learn how to go second.
Yeah.
Learning how to go second is a huge skill in Guild Ball, and maybe that's a longer segment that we need to do on the show at some point in the future. But definitely is it's a thing that a good player of this game definitely knows how to allocate their influence when they're going second, and how to end a turn ready to go second. And that's spend some time thinking about those. Spend a few games trying to go second, get used to it, because I know that a lot of people have going first as kind of their strategic arc. I see it a lot where people just try to mass momentum in hopes of getting that sort of uninterrupted high influence attack, or that uncontested run with a mist or a flint towards goal. But you're not always going to be able to do that, and some teams are definitely going to put you behind in the execution order more than others, and this is one of them. So learn how to do that.
It's definitely a good point to make, because I've certainly fallen prey to it before, particularly in the games where I was really trying to learn how to play Guild Ball myself. Was the first thing you do learn is, as you said, amassing that momentum, just trying to guarantee that first uninterrupted activation. But then suddenly you sat there going, he's on 7 momentum points. I'm on 6. I could get to 7, but I'm not really going to get past 7. So am I really going to spend this 7 momentum on just a 50-50 roll, or could I spend that 7 momentum points on all of the heals I could do with my team? It's quite often that you can be better off just saying, okay, I'm going to lose this roll, but I'm going to do a couple of heals that are going to be really important and will allow me to survive that first activation by giving it to the opponent.
Yeah, or you can spend it on some teamwork plays to get your guys in a better position.
Yep.
No, the way I often approach the game is that I essentially want to go second until the last turn, because I assume that the last turn you want to go first so you can win the game.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm happy to go second the whole game. But generally speaking, when the game is on the line and, I need, Flint to score a goal, or Midas to score a goal, whoever it is, that's when I want to go first. And knowing when to flip that switch, and sort of being able to look a turn ahead to know that next turn is going to be the last turn. And switching over from whatever you were doing to stockpiling momentum to get that is, it's a skill, but it's not a skill. It's not a talent, right? So it's not something that you need to have a sixth sense for. It's not something you can't learn. It's just the sort of thing where you need to, it's just one of the aspects of the game that you need to sort of get your head around and get good at. And, it will take you. It'll kind of take you to the next level as a coach in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice. When I've said before that knowledge is power, and that couldn't be any more important than when playing with or against the Morticians. Knowing what multitude of options that there are open to the Mortician player, particularly when Puppet Master is on the table. So I always tell Mortician players, make sure you always allocate at least 4 influence to Obvious, so that you've always got the option to Puppet Master something. And it's something you should be aware of when playing against them, is that when Puppet Master's on the table, just be aware it's got lots of options open to them, and that you are very rarely totally safe. Just try and, even though it's kind of a stressful thing to keep in your mind while you're playing a game, that you're never really completely safe, it is good to keep it in the back of your mind, because it will just by accepting that you're not safe will make your play safer during the game. Just accepting lots of weird things can happen. So.
Yeah, and just remember that Puppet Master, it's just going to happen once per turn. You know, it's once it's done, you've got the rest of the turn to get revenge.
and it is 4 influence expended from the Morticians pool as well. You know,
absolutely.
It's a big, nice, juicy ability, but at the same time, it's an expensive one. So it comes at a premium.
All right, well, great. Thanks for talking with us, Jamie, and I hope that everybody's next game with the Morticians is just a little bit harder.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, I do. You know, we do this so people can enjoy the game of Guild Ball some more. So hopefully, you can enjoy playing against the Morticians as well.
Exactly. Very good. Well, thank you and good night, sir.
Thank you.
Let us have a bit of report from you there on what happened at Huzzah over the weekend.
So we had this is the first kind of organized event in the Mid-Atlantic region. For those of you who are over in the UK and are confused by that term, that would mean if you look at the very large, lengthy coast of the US that's facing the big Atlantic pond, that would be in the middle of it. The Mid-Atlantic. Right?
Not in the middle of the Atlantic. So this is not the first event in Bermuda. It's the Mid-Atlantic.
Right. The Mid-Atlantic. So, and I do say the Mid-Atlantic because there's a couple of key facts that really jumped out at me. We had people, if you go from the person who came to the Huzzah event from the furthest south, and you track from the furthest south to the furthest north person that came in, we had people across a 200-mile area come to this event yesterday. Mm-hmm. We had 20 people show up. We had people from an area in Virginia called Culpeper, Virginia, which is a bit south of us, all the way up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All of them came down. A really exciting day. We had people showing up throughout the day, which is how we got to the 20. We got to see. So the way I set it up, we had originally set up one row of tables with 3 boards on it because I was expecting 10 to 12 and knew that we might spike. And Maurice had come out and he brought a bunch of extra mats, and he and I had spoken beforehand. And I'm like, dude, I got the 4 mats I have, which means we have a demo mat which I'm going to use, and then I got these 3 other mats. Can you at least bring your Guild Ball mat and maybe a couple of others in case we spike? He's like, yeah, I'll bring a bunch. Thank God for Maurice. Because at one point I had to push a whole other row of tables together. We had 7 games going at the same time, 14 people playing, 3 spectators at that same time. So you're talking about 17 people playing, not counting me, who's, currently running a demo. Over the day, we ended up having 9 new converts into Guild Ball, all who either had seen it and hadn't played, or didn't have teams, people that had teams and hadn't played yet. We had 9 people convert over. Several of those are now out looking. I've already got emails today about they're looking at new teams and reading fluff to figure out what they want to get and getting on the online store to go order stuff. It was just a great day overall. Mm-hmm. We had, and this is actually what shocked me, physically, not counting the massive amount of paper dolls, which will be, there is a picture of the paper doll setup. We had full paper doll teams for 2 copies of every team. Yeah, so it's this great table setup of all these paper dolls with some water bottles and stuff that people left on there because I'm lazy taking pictures. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was great coming out and just seeing the turnout. I'm really thankful for everybody that came. We actually had a representation of every single team out there, which was really cool to see. Mm-hmm. And that's before you get to the people grabbing paper dolls to try out new teams. So, a lot of fun. And that
sounds awesome.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, of course, we packed everything up, and I got to face off against the engineers. And the engineers are just a funky team. Mm-hmm. They were an interesting team to play against. So,
yeah, I guess we should say that engineer bounty is still out there because we haven't had an opportunity to claim it. But
and yesterday was not a tournament, so and Jan actually lost to me, but we called the game right before the end. But it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. I had him pretty pinned down with his engineers. Mm-hmm. So I think, what else can I add? Oh, so one of the nice things, one of the guys who showed up is actually an amateur photographer.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of Bill's shaky cam, which where there'll be some pictures posted. Actually, by the time this releases, we should have a couple of pictures, 3 or 4 pictures of the event posted out there. So, but those are my shaky cam pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to have this guy. He went through, had this nice DSLR pseudo professional looking camera with a tripod, and actually did pictures of people's models that had models painted. Took pictures of the event overall after he got his demo and was very excited about the demo. So that's going to be really cool because he does some great pictures. So there'll be some good pictures out there on Facebook and out on the blog. I'm going to get them onto, I'll post them on my blog, and I'll also put them in the forums until we get the forums updated.
Cool, man. So I think that'll do it for today. Yeah, we're not doing a feedback segment today, but I knew that Errata talk was going to run really long.
Well, wasn't this our feedback to?
This was our
on
feedback.
Behalf of the community. We did this for you.
We did.
The listeners.
Good save, Bill. So anyway,
let's see what Ox has to say about that.
Let's see what Ox has to say about. Well, see what Ox has to say about any of this. So thanks for listening, and thanks for coming in and talking to us, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely, and good night to the listener.
Yeah, and good night indeed.
And if you're not listening to this at night, listen to it again tonight.
Listen to it 5 or 6 times. It will help you sleep and digest your food.
Exactly.
All right, good night, everybody.
Knees up. Watch the knives. To join the conversation, comment on the show post at guildballtonight.com or email us at guildballtonight@gmail.com. Phil can also be heard on the Game Punting podcast. Bill can also be heard on the Gamers Lounge podcast. Check them out on iTunes.
Also, feel free to give us 5 stars on iTunes. Every little bit helps. But when you do, don't write a review of the show. No. Instead, just tell everybody why you love Flint so very much. The following events are all coming shortly. The Skaldic Shield in Manchester, UK on November 14th. More information available at the Guild Ball Informer YouTube channel. The St. Louis Open in St. Louis, USA on November 15th. Find out about it on the official Facebook group or in Tiebreak. The Leeds Winter Ball in Leeds, UK on November 28th. More information available in the Guild Ball forums. And Crucible 5 in Orlando, Florida, USA on March 19th and 20th. For more information, check out the Guild Ball Tonight Facebook page. If you'd like us to mention an event near you, drop us an email at guildballtonight@gmail.com with the information on what, when, where, and how to get more information, and we will include it. And now for this week's edition of the Guild Ball Club Roundup. To get your club included in this list, send us an email at guildballtonight@gmail.com. Include the name, location, and best contact method, and we'll get you in the next show. You'll need to resubmit your club about every 3 episodes, so keep that in mind. Armada Games in Tampa, Florida. Find them at armadagames.com. Leeds Night Owls in Leeds, UK. Find them via Google. The following clubs can all be found on Facebook: 1066 Wargaming in Hastings, UK. Capital Guild Ball at Dream Wizards in Rockville, Maryland. 2-6 Wargaming in Cambridge, UK. Warhammer Gaming Club in Sunderland, UK. Siege Tabletop in Beverly, UK. Sheffield and Rotherham Games Club in Sheffield, UK. Group North Wargaming Society in Adelaide, Australia. War and Peace Gaming Club in Sandiacre, UK. The Outpost in Sheffield, UK. And Dark Worlds Gaming Society in Fareham, UK. The following clubs also sent in information. You'll have to find them yourself. Chelmsford Bunker in Chelmsford, UK. Slayer Gaming in Mansfield, UK. And Thomas House in Dublin, Ireland. It is time once again for another installment of Ox's Poetry Corner.
Hey, don't look at me. No one on my team got hit. Innocent as lambs.
It's cool. I actually had a point to make, but I got lost just listening to your voice, Bill.
Well, I have that effect on people. Usually when they can't leave.